This is the MLW Radio Network.
Brothers and sisters, why the Undertaker episode is finally here, yes. And I have a question for my brothers and sisters who enjoy something to wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Do you want another bonus show? Did you hear what I said? Of course you do. Of course you want a bonus show. Well, we need to learn a little bit about our followers of love. So please go to podsurvey.com/wrestle. That's podsurvey.com/wrestle. You'll take a fast and easy and anonymous survey. Yes, that's right. That will help us get to know you a little better. Well, our show is free, but we love our sponsors. And if you love our show, then please take a few minutes right now to go to podsurvey.com/wrestle. Even if you've done this survey before for another show, forbid, that doesn't help us. Oh no, we need your help now. We need your love. And when you complete the fast and easy survey, you can enter to win $100 Amazon gift card. But you want a bonus show, don't you? You love bonus shows. When we get to 3,000 surveys completed, we will give you a bonus show. That's right. Let us know you completed the survey by tweeting a screenshot or a picture to us at Prichard Show. That's on Twitter. And be sure to nominate what you want the bonus show to be all about. Enter to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Help support our show for free. And when we get to 3,000 surveys completed, you earn a bonus show. That's right. Go to podsurvey.com/wrestle. That's podsurvey.com/wrestle.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with mesothelioma? You probably have many questions, such as, what should I do? Where can I get more information? RGT4Law.com can answer those questions and help you get the money you deserve. Call 855-RGT4Law or visit RGT4Law.com and fill out the simple form for a free consultation. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know, that's not a rib. She booted. No, there's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you double cheeseburger. You take the gravy, you know, and then double mayo. You know, it's called chicken salad. Double onion.
Nothing but an egg sucking dog.
Throw it in your Google machine.
Goddamn, kid. God damn it. What the hell show you got there? I need more. Yeah.
What say you?
Pronoun, pal.
And now, something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Prichard.
The second most recognized athlete in the entire world today.
Conrad Thompson.
What happened to win? What would Vince say about that?
Well, hey, Vince, to the my shoulders look good tonight. Yeah. So big. Yeah. That's good.
Bullshit.
Welcome to Wrestle. Hey.
Roll title now.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle with.
Something to wrestle with. Bruce Prichard. All right, so let's get into it. It's The Undertaker, arguably the greatest character the WWE ever created, and Bruce was there from the very beginning. We're going to give you 1993 and 94 today with a little bit of a preamble about what happened before then. Don't worry, we are going to have more Undertaker episodes in the future. but it's impossible, guys, for us to cram 26 years into 3 hours. It just can't happen. So instead, we're going to break it down a couple years at a time. Why did we start with 93, 94? Well, it's easy. Undertaker comes in November of 90. Bruce is out of the company by May of 91. Bruce is back in late August 92. So if we're going to go chronologically covering a full calendar year, 93 and 94 are as early as we can go. But we'll give a little bit of backstory. But before we get there, I guess we should talk about the Undertaker's last match. And we saw that at WrestleMania 33. Bruce, you weren't there at the event, but you were in town, and I know you watched it on the WWE Network. What did you think of Taker's last match?
I thought it was apropos, and I cried like a bitch. It was a nice ending of a chapter, if you ask me. But I don't think it's over.
What do you mean you don't think it's over? You think he's going to wrestle again?
Eventually, yes, I do.
Well, that's a hot take that nobody's talking about. The rumor and innuendo is that he's going to have major hip replacement surgery. Are you saying that's not going to keep him from coming back?
I'm saying short of being wheeled down to the ring in a wheelchair, that we've not seen the last of The Undertaker in the ring. Now, he would argue with me on that and say, no, that's it. But you never say never in this business, and The Undertaker in that character will live on forever, and I think that he could still go out and have a match. May not be what it was 25 years ago, but by God, he'll go out and the people will be behind him just as much as they ever were.
Well, he certainly deserves it, and we're going to talk about all things Undertaker today. We're going to go ahead and, I guess, try to start at the beginning. He was born on March 24th, 1965. He's a 52-year-old man now.
It's a young man.
Absolutely. Mark Calloway was the birth name, of course, and from right there in your old stomping grounds, Houston, Texas. He starts wrestling in 1984 for World Class. He makes his debut there as Texas Red. He runs through a few gimmicks early in his career. He bounces around Memphis. He's managed by Dutch Mantel. He has some matches with Kerry Von Erich. He wins some gold in Memphis and then eventually moves on to WCW. While he's in Memphis, he is wrestling as the Punisher or the Master of Pain. He finds his way to WCW in 1989, and he gets his first big break there when Sid Vicious is injured and Dan Spivey is looking for a tag team partner to be his new Skyscraper tag team partner. And Mean Mark Callis gets the nod. I think he starts as Calloway there, but then later changes his name to Mean Mark Callis. And he has his maybe biggest victory in WCW when he beats Flying Brian Pillman at Clash of the Champions 11. He uses a heart punch as a finisher at this time. And he gets yet another manager, which I find interesting considering what happened at WrestleMania 30. The manager is Paul E. Dangerously. So, in a weird way, The Undertaker was one of the original Paul Heyman guys.
Oh, Happy Heyman, the jovial Jew.
We can't say the name Paul Heyman on this show without you breaking out a fun impression for us, though. Hypothetically, if Paul E. Dangerously at the time was going to champion his man, Mean Mark Callis, in a creative meeting, that he should go over Flying Brian Pillman and what would probably be considered an upset since Pillman was pretty over at that point. What might that sound like?
If I may have another volley, sir, allow me to explain to you why this big red-headed monster needs to take out the flying one with a heart punch. He will destroy him, sir. And Pillman is down in 5 seconds, never to return because everyone knows he has a heart condition.
I love that. Thank you for that. His next big shot is for the U.S. title against Lex Luger at the Great American.
I will one day get him booked, and I will deliver a defeat to him at the hands of my, I don't know what the fuck he called. What was he called, Brock?
The Beast Incarnate?
No, his client or what the hell?
He's an advocate for
I will be the advocate for the man that will finally defeat him in an event they will hail as Mania of Wrestling. Sir, you may continue. If you would like the event to go 10 seconds, I don't have a problem with that either.
Here's what's crazy. When he's managing him here, that match we're referencing at WrestleMania 30 is 25 years later. That's absurd.
A little bit.
His biggest match that we talked about in our previous episode, which if you really want to hear about the debut of The Undertaker, we encourage you to go check out Survivor Series 1990. It's available in the archives, and it's notable for two things. Well, a lot of things, but the two biggest ones being The Undertaker's debut when he was Kane the Undertaker. And what else is notable about Survivor Series 1990, Bruce?
Cowboy Cooker.
I was hoping you'd do that. Anyway, you guys kind of discover him at this Great American Bash 1990. He is challenging for the United States Championship. The champ at the time, of course, is the Total Package Lex Luger, and that winds up being his last major appearance. He slowly fades away and then signs with the WWF. Now, there's various different reports about how that happens. Let's touch on it again here. Do you remember it that Mark was released from his contract by WCW, or that he waited his contract out so he could sign with Vince?
He waited his contract out. His contract was coming up for renewal, and I got a phone call one day from Paul Heyman, sir, if I may. Are you aware of the young man named Mean Mark Callis? And I was a big fan of Mark's, going back to 1987 and seeing him in WCCW or USWA, whatever the hell it was. And I was very, very aware of him. I was a big fan of him, and I said, yeah, definitely interested. And so then began the pursuit to get Mean Mark into the WWF.
So let's talk about it. He debuts on November 19th, 1993 in Rochester, New York, defeating a gentleman named Jim McPherson. What are your favorite matches with Jim McPherson, Bruce?
I have no idea who the hell Jim McPherson is. Sorry.
The next night, he defeats Dusty Rhodes in Syracuse, New York, and he's also interviewed by Brother Love, and that airs on the Wrestling Challenge episode from December 23rd, 1990. So if you'd like to see his first ever interview that he did for television with the WWF, you could go check that out. Wrestling Challenge, December 23rd, 1990. But then he makes his television debut that we're all familiar with on Survivor Series 1990, and that is November 22nd. So he actually debuted with the company a couple of days ahead of time, and when he makes his debut, of course, on Survivor Series, he's the mystery partner for the $1 Million Man's team, and has one hell of a debut. Again, that whole episode is available in the archives, 1990 Survivor Series. Catch everybody up, though, again, Bruce, as to why you would want to debut a character like this at a house show rather than a pay-per-view ahead of time.
Just to get his sea legs under him, and he had never worked in our ring before. Our ring was bigger than the WCW rings. It was much less forgiving. It also had ropes versus cables, and just didn't want the very first time for him to step into a WWF ring to be on pay-per-view.
So Paul Bearer is introduced as the Undertaker's new manager on the Brother Love show, and this aired on Superstars on February 16th, 1991. So if you'd like to see Paul Bearer in his debut for the Undertaker, it's February 16th, 1991 on Superstars. But a lot of people may not realize that Percy Pringle was actually once upon a time working with Mark Calloway in a prior life. Catch everybody up, Bruce.
Well, Percy Pringle was actually Mean Mark or the Punisher, whatever the hell name he was using at that time. He was actually his first manager in Dallas for his very first match. And I want to say that one of Mark's first matches was against Bruiser Brody. And Brody was actually very kind to him and helped him out quite a bit and didn't just go out and beat the shit out of him for that match. But it was ironic that his first manager would end up really being his last manager.
So let's run through it. 1991 highlights. Of course, we know WrestleMania 7 was against Jimmy Snuka at WrestleMania 7. Once again, we've already covered in our archives if you'd like to hear more about that. But we also saw him feud with the Ultimate Warrior, and we saw a series of body bag matches, which is probably the first time a body bag had been in the WWF, wouldn't you imagine?
In the ring itself or just in general?
Well, that sounds like a good story. Let's start with in general.
No, I think that was the first time. Let's stick with that. Yeah. You know, the whole idea behind the body bag was it was so much easier than trying to get a casket every night and having to deal with caskets. So the body bag was something Paul Bearer and the ring crew, they could buy a bunch of body bags and Paul could get a discount on them because he was actually a mortician. And so we got a ton of body bags, carried them around on the ring truck.
I know we're not going to explore it in great detail, but we have to cover the Ultimate Warrior on the funeral parlor, where they...
I was there for that.
Well, I know you were there, but I'm saying we promised 93, 94, but I at least want to touch on it. I'm sure we'll come back and we'll cover it in great detail at some other time, but catch me up. This is one of my favorite memories of the funeral parlor because, well, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, the whole idea was simply to bury the Ultimate Warrior, and
not the way you buried him on our show in the archives, but a different type of burial.
A real burial, but on TV. Let's put it that way. Well, no, I did that too. So, but it was a way to get the whole Ultimate Warrior and Undertaker angle started, to have the Undertaker place him in a casket and seal the casket airtight so that no air could get in. I always loved that because if you have ever buried someone or, you know, had to deal with funeral arrangements and things like that, really the air tightness comes in the sarcophagus gimmick, the concrete gimmick that goes on top of the casket itself. But nonetheless, Vince had this thing about, I want to seal the casket. I want to hear the air come out of that casket. So when you turn the light, you hear the air, and it's his last breath. But the idea was simply to bury the Ultimate Warrior, put him in there, and we had the casket all made up, all nicey nice with the Ultimate Warrior's face on the casket, special for him, and we wanted Warrior to claw at that and claw at the insides of it, so that when they finally did get the casket open, that it looked like Warrior was just clawing for his life to finally get out of that casket. But the hindsight being 2020, there's a picture out there somewhere on Twitter and what have you of Vince in the casket.
Yep.
That day. And we took Road Warrior Hawk with us to the funeral parlor because we had to buy a casket. Now, there was a law that you could not sell caskets. So if you just wanted to buy a casket to have in your home or for a talking point or whatever, you couldn't just go buy a casket.
Who the fuck's buying a casket for a talking point?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of weird people in this world. I'm not going to mention Jim Cornette's name, but
Wait. What would Jim Cornette shopping for a casket sound like?
Goddamn. You're going to bury me in the motherfucker. I'm not going to live in there forever. Goddamn, what the fuck? No, I don't know.
I need double pillows, double satin.
You know, the funniest thing about this weekend that we'll talk about in a little bit was Jim Cornette doing Jim Cornette.
That sounds kinky. So let's get back to Vince and a casket.
We get back to the casket. You couldn't just go buy a casket. It is illegal. So we had to use Paul Bearer's mortician license and pull some strings to get people to actually sell us a casket. So we took Road Warrior Hawk with us because he was about the same size as Ultimate Warrior to measure to see if he fit the casket.
Why didn't Ultimate Warrior go casket shopping?
Are you serious with that question?
Well, why did Hawk have to go? Why couldn't Warrior go?
He was probably busy eating chicken breasts and working out or something. Who knows? Chicken breasts and dry pasta. I don't know. He couldn't be inconvenienced. I don't really know. But we took Hawk because he was there. And he was the same size. And if it fit him, then we knew it would fit Warrior. So we went, and for those of you who have not yet been in a casket is simply the most... For those of
you who have not yet... Who the fuck listening has been in a casket? You're into some weird shit, dude.
You know what? I bet you there's some people out there that have tried out a casket before.
I don't buy that.
I'm just saying. But we all got in the casket that's kind of like I don't know. I got a picture right up there on my wall of me in a casket with Erwin R. Shyster. But it's the most uncomfortable friggin' thing in the world. Because obviously the person going in it is dead. They don't necessarily have to be comfortable. But you look at them, they look like the most comfortable things in the world when people are laying there right before you bury them. Do they not?
Hypothetically, if The Undertaker had tagged with IRS, would they have called the tag team Death and Taxes?
You laugh. That was an idea at one point.
Are you serious?
You're over there playing ha-ha and shit, and that was actually kicked around at one point. So everybody laid in it, and they're metal. So we had to figure out how to make it so that we wouldn't kill Warrior when we put him in the casket, because it's just metal beams and screws and shit sticking out that are pretty damn uncomfortable. So we get it. We got to gimmick the bottom of it and put padding in there and all this other shit. But everybody had to take pictures laying in the casket. And like I said, there's a famous one of Vince out there. And it's me and Jack Lanza, Pat Patterson, and a few other people standing around it. So we got everything set up. But what they got Warrior in it and said, okay, they're going to turn this lock. And when they turn the lock, the only way to get out of it at that point is we have to pry it open. So we gimmicked the lock so that we could get him out, but the best part of all was once they put a Warrior in there and the agents come out, if you go back and watch the tape, Jack Lanza has a sledgehammer. And they beat the living fuck out of that casket before they finally get him out. Because Warrior wasn't the most popular guy in the world. And truth be told, if it were real life and people had to run out there to go save him from a casket or from a fire, people might bring a couple cups of water and throw it on him, but very few are going to be carrying buckets. So they took their time, and Lanza had an extra bit of fun just slamming the sledgehammer into the side of the casket, because he's in this metal casket and you hear the BAM and just kind of ricocheting in his head. But it was hilarious. And Terry Garvin, there's a great shot of Terry Garvin with a drill. I've got a drill, but it wasn't plugged in. It was like the fucking Keystone Cops, them coming out to rescue the Warrior. But that was kind of the backstory on Ultimate Warrior being buried on the funeral parlor. It entertained us more than anybody else.
Well, it was entertaining to us. And then they kind of censor this, I think, and they show the Ultimate Warrior going into like convulsions and spitting shit up. And it was crazy. Hypothetically, when they're producing that scene of the medical people working on the Ultimate Warrior, what might that have sounded like if Vince was directing?
All right, pal. Now, this is serious when you get back here. We'll have the medical crew all around. And guys, this is very solemn because we don't know exactly what condition Warrior's in. And when they start to bring you back, and you've got to be coughing and spewing and just and gasping for that last breath. Just imagine. This is your very last breath, but you've got one more in ya. And guys, everybody just be chaotic around here. I don't fucking know. Something like that. But yeah, it was, he just wanted chaos. We needed chaos.
Whose idea was the whole body bag gimmick?
I want to say it was Paul Bearer's. because it was easy and it had never been done before. And it was something that could be done. This is the other thing people forget a lot. It was something that could be done with everybody.
Yeah.
So like when guys have these great finishes and they do this spectacular finish that they can only do on a guy that's 120 pounds and 5'0". All of a sudden you get in the ring with Braun Strowman and you can't do it. The body bag we could do with everybody.
Talk to me about the Ultimate Warrior. I want to talk a little bit more about this because I know some of that happened before you left. Ultimate Warrior working with the Undertaker. Have you spoken to Taker about what it was like working with Warrior? Did Warrior get along with Taker? Obviously, at that time, Taker was still very new to the company and probably wanting to just kind of get along in his new position. The Warrior was the top guy, but we don't ever hear any stories really of them working together. Do you have anything you could share with us?
You know, Taker just wanted to get along, and Taker was happy to be in a top spot, and it was a top spot working with Ultimate Warrior. It was a big angle. It was a big deal. Taker simply was happy to be there, I guess, you know, and he just wanted to do whatever he needed to do to get along and make it work. But I think you would be hard pressed to find anybody that ever said they really enjoyed working with Warrior. He was stiff. He was sloppy, but Taker was a double tough son of a bitch, especially back in those days.
How appropriate that we're burying a guy when we're covering a topic based on a character named The Undertaker. After the body bag matches with the Ultimate Warrior, he feuds with Sid Justice. And Sid wins a lot of these, mostly on the house show loops, though. But I did find this interesting in my research. On September 12th, 91, in Maine, Hot Rod is substituting for Sid Justice, and he beat The Undertaker in a body bag match. I found that interesting.
Why's that?
I don't know. I just did. The idea that Piper beat The Undertaker in a body bag match just, huh?
Well, the philosophy behind that substitution, wanting to leave the crowd happy.
He goes on to work a series of matches in the house shows with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, but he gets his big break, and this is a show that we'll probably never cover because Bruce wasn't there. But the 1991 Survivor Series, he actually beats Hulk Hogan for the championship, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past. There was a considerable amount of heat on The Undertaker right after because Hogan may or may not have suggested that the Ultimate Warrior dropped him on his head. Now, if you go back and you watch the videotape, Taker could not have protected him anymore. He takes a tombstone onto the chair that was slid into the ring by the Nature Boy Ric Flair. But ultimately, Hogan's head is 8 or 12 inches away from the mat, so he took care of him. Kind of tell everybody how that affected the Ultimate Warrior and his relationship with Hulk Hogan moving forward.
It didn't affect the Ultimate Warrior at all, but it did affect the Undertaker. I think that he was, that night, and he was upset because he didn't know, what had happened. He didn't know if he had hurt him or not, and I don't think that anybody really knew at that point. However, in later years, didn't set well with him, and he was unhappy over the fact once he got to see the tape and saw that, hey man, I took good care of you, that it continued on, that there was a perception that he didn't. So again, I think if you were to poll, same thing, like I said, with Ultimate Warrior, if you were to ask guys who said that he wasn't stiff and was a good worker, you wouldn't find a lot of people. If you were to ask people on the other side of that, if Undertaker was stiff or sloppy or, hurt anybody, you'd find very few people that would ever come up and say otherwise.
Take your pills, you old fuck.
They're in the other house.
Oh, see, last week, if you saw on Twitter, Bruce bragged that he not only had a pool and a hot tub, but he also had a lake in his backyard. Well, now, since the show is blown up so damn much and we're doing live shows now, he's actually saying, oh, They're in the other house. Must be his summer home.
You know what I mean? I'm in my goddamn garage office.
You ain't gotta get hot about it. Don't get hot about it.
I'm about half hot.
Yeah. Okay. You make fun of me saying Ultimate Warrior, and you're over there fucking doing your Daffy Duck routine. So after this, they booked Tuesday night in Texas. Again, Bruce was not there for this.
I was Tuesday night in Texas.
Okay, fucking take it from here. Tell us all about it.
There?
Great. Let's hear all about it.
Was it in Austin or was it in San Antonio? I don't know.
You were there.
I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I was backstage. Vince was telling me how much everybody hated me. And Taker dropped the title back to Hulk Hogan.
Anything else?
I thought we were talking about 92, 93.
Well, I was trying to lay a little background.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupt now. You're going to be mad.
No, fine. There you go. You wanted your story about Tuesday night in Texas? Bruce told it. 1992. Let's get into it. He has a series of matches with Sid Justice. And then on a January 28th edition of Superstars, we see the funeral parlor segment where Jake Roberts attacks The Undertaker when The Undertaker has his arm locked in a casket. Paul Bearer gets the DDT, and The Undertaker starts to give chase to Jake, dragging the casket. I've always been curious about this funeral parlor set because obviously this talk show format has been a big deal in the company going all the way back to Roddy Piper. And of course, we know there was the Barber Shop and the Snake Pit and Piper's Pit, of course, the Brother Love Show. Who was in charge of designing these sets?
At that time, it was probably a guy named Dr. Paint, who designed a lot of stuff backstage and designed some of those sets. But that was Richie Posner was a little bit before that and after that, but Dr. Paint was the guy that we traveled with.
So would Dr. Paint get all of the future caskets too, now that you guys had the Paul Bearer hookup, or would Paul Bearer continue to do that?
We had to use Paul's license, but yes, he would.
So this Dr. Paint guy, he picks out all the flowers and all that stuff too?
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much took care of all of that, but, you know, I mean, they could have done a whole hell of a lot better job if they had just used proflowers.com and used code WWE at the checkout. I'll tell you that right now.
Now, Bruce, before we get there, if Paul Bearer was around to see The Undertaker retire at WrestleMania this past year, what would he recommend as a retirement gift for someone that's as hard to buy for as the Deadman himself?
Oh, yes, it's proflowers.com, of course. My Undertaker is hard to buy for, but I know he'll like proflowers.com. And I won't have to sell my soul because proflowers.com is affordable.
Paul, what do you like best about proflowers.com?
Proflowers.com makes it easy for you. They're fresh, they're priced right, and they're a perfect gift for literally anyone. But you know what's best, Conrad?
What's that, Paul Bearer?
Proflowers.com delivers straight to the recipient's door. How easy is that? Oh, yes!
Well, if that wasn't easy enough, Paul, proflowers.com has a special offer just for our listeners. Get $10 off your purchase of $29 or more, and this still works on best-selling gifts like their 100 Blooms bouquet, a dozen red roses, or even their totally unique plant gifts. To snag this great deal, just go to proflowers.com and enter code WWE at checkout.
You know, Conrad, I remember when I first surprised Jerry Jarrett with proflowers.com. He was surprised. He was so excited. He loved them. But he didn't know it was so easy at proflowers.com. Oh, yes!
I find it fascinating, Paul, that you would have been in a situation where you bought flowers for Jerry Jarrett. What did he say when he got these? Proflowers.com bouquets are guaranteed fresh for 7 days or your money back. They have a 7-step quality check, which means the flowers are always awesome. Their website, man, it's super easy to use. So easy, even Bruce can do it. You can schedule your delivery ahead of time for any date you want, and they'll get back to you on your day. That's right. ProFlowers.com is a no-brainer gift for a birthday, an anniversary, every occasion, or no occasion at all. Man, chicks really dig that. Anytime when you want to make her feel special, just go to ProFlowers.com. They take care of all the details.
Oh, yes, do yourself a favor. Help out the show by supporting ProFlowers.com. I know you have either a birthday or a special anniversary coming up. So right now, get $10 off your purchase of $29 or more at ProFlowers. But this deal definitely won't last long. Just go to ProFlowers.com, enter the code WWE at checkout, and get that special deal. Oh, yes.
It's officially my new favorite one. I know you hate doing it, but man, that was fun. Of course, that segment on the Funeral Parlor sets up the WrestleMania 8 match with Jake Roberts and The Undertaker. Then The Undertaker has a feud with the Berserker and a match with Kamala at SummerSlam 92, which is pretty famous for his entrance there. And then Bruce comes back. So September of 1992, he goes into a series of matches for the WWF Championship, this time against Ric Flair, and he wins most of them by disqualification. So I'm curious, Bruce, there is an evolution of the character here where he's dead and all the announcers and children are scared of him, and now he's a babyface. Who decides, hey man, I think this guy could be a babyface?
You know, it's funny, back in 1990, we went to the gym one day. It was myself, Vince, and The Undertaker. And I was playing AC/DC, Hell's Bells, and I was explaining to Vince that I wanted to do a video. I said, God, we've got to get the rights to this song and do a video for The Undertaker. He looked at me and said, God damn, pal, that'll make him a babyface. I've got plenty of years as a nasty heel before I make that turn, and what a babyface he'll make. And we all kind of chuckled, thinking, how the fuck do you make this big ugly bastard a babyface?
Right.
But then as time went on and you started listening to the crowd, boy, they loved him. They just, it did not take long for the audience to turn Undertaker babyface.
So this is during a time in late 92 here where the WWF is in a little bit of a transition. The Undertaker during this time is working a series of matches with Papa Shango, Nails, Razor Ramon, guys like that. But the Ultimate Warrior experiment, the rose was off the bloom, so to speak. He had the alleged incident at SummerSlam 91, where he's difficult about money and is ultimately let go. He comes back, but then he has a steroid issue in November of 92. That throws Survivor Series 92 into a little bit of a tailspin. And ultimately, they talked Mr. Perfect into coming back out of retirement to step in. In hindsight, do you think The Undertaker wasn't ready to be in that main event spot yet? Who was not buying into The Undertaker being a suitable headliner for Survivor Series 92?
I don't know if he wasn't ready to step into that spot, but I think Vince just had a different vision in his head and thought that if Perfect were to come back and Perfect were to come back as a babyface at that time, that it just would have fit the situation better. That's pretty much it. It was just a feel and what he had in his head, he being Vince.
All right, so before we wrap up 1992, I don't know when we'll talk about this again, so let's just throw it out here. It's directly from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. The $150,000, how do you say Nail's last name? Wachholz?
Wachholz.
Okay. Was allegedly trying to extort from McMahon at the time of the incident that was talked about by a Titan PR firm was, according to one WWF source, money he wanted to be paid in advance for putting The Undertaker over every night at the house shows. The SummerSlam payoff he was unhappy about was reportedly $8,000. Do you remember hearing that the beef that he had with the company was over A, a SummerSlam payoff being $8,000, or B, him wanting to be paid in advance for losing to the Undertaker?
I've never heard anything about him wanting to be paid in advance for the Undertaker. His beef, to my knowledge, he had two beefs. One was his SummerSlam payoff, and the other one was a
Vince McMahon
drug
touched his
test
pecker. Oh, wasn't that?
And that's what had him all upset, was a result of a drug test that he was complaining about, and that got him all fired up. And then the payoff situation was the other one. I've never heard anything about $150,000 to put Undertaker over. That's crazy.
Well, all right. There's rumor and innuendo out there that Nails accused McMahon of sexual assault or whatever the case may be. Give me something.
Well, they had a big argument. Earl Hebner witnessed the thing through the door because it was heated and it was loud.
Wait.
So there was
wait, stop. Earl Hebner witnessed it through the door. It was heated and loud.
Yeah.
I asked if there was a sex incident, and you said Earl watched.
You like the way that I phrase all that. See, I saved really that for the payoff that no, there was no sexual harassment or touching of any way, shape, or form. It was a heated argument with Nails doing a lot of yelling and screaming, and then lunged at Vince, choking him, kind of tumbling Vince's ass over tea kettle in his chair.
Allegedly, doesn't Nails start screaming when people start to come in the room? He touched my dick or something like that.
I have no idea. I wasn't there for it, so I don't know. But I don't know.
The way I hear
Sarge
it is,
Sarge and Arnie Skolin were the first two in there.
The way I hear it, when people start coming in the room, he starts screaming and pointing. He touched my dick. He touched my dick.
Oh my God.
Which is just only in wrestling.
Only in wrestling, folks. Oh, God damn, only in the WWF.
Who knows when we'll talk about Nails again. Okay. 1993 is right around the corner. But first, let's talk about the Wrestling Observer Newsletter's awards issue. He got an honorable mention for Best Babyface. Number
Who's
5.
he, pal? Goddamn pronouns, pal.
Well, we're talking about The Undertaker, sir. Try paying attention.
I'm talking about pronouns, pal. Damn it, over at BrucePrichard.com. We got all that shit.
Yeah, we got lots of stuff over there, Bruce, but it's not time. Talking about The Observer, damn it. Most overrated. He got an honorable mention in most overrated. I found that interesting. But then he gets best gimmick, number 1. I found that kind of interesting because it feels like in hindsight, a lot of people would have been negative on this gimmick, but it seems as if the fans, even back then, the smart marks, were super into it. He starts 93, working house shows, mainly with Yokozuna and Papa Shango. He's going over Papa Shango in most of early January. Around the loop, they're drawing decent enough crowds, I guess, for 93, 4,800 folks in St. Louis, 1,900 in Des Moines, 6,300 in Philadelphia, 5,800 in Boston. He has a segment on Wrestling Challenge in January 4th, where he takes on Razor Ramon. Razor walks out after sustaining a chokeslam and is ultimately counted out. This seems like a little bit of an odd pairing because Razor was one of your guys you were trying to get over in a big way in early 93. But he's facing The Undertaker. Doesn't that seem like an odd pairing for a wrestling challenge to you?
No, it was probably just an opportunity to get both guys on in a starting position, but obviously there was no finish in it. So in that regard, all's good. No harm, no foul. No harm, no foul, no finish.
There you go. He does another Superstars taping the very next day, this time in San Antonio, Texas. Here he defeats Yokozuna by DQ when Yoko repeatedly hits Taker with the salt bucket. And this is after Taker sat up from Yoko's belly-to-belly suplex. After the match, Taker seemingly avoids the bonsai drop and takes Yoko down with a flying clothesline and a choke slam. That match is actually on a couple of VHSs, Bashed in the USA and Undertaker, his gravest matches. Catch me up on the sit-up. There's been lots of rumor and innuendo about how that came to be, what the inspiration for that was. A lot of people are freestyling, oh, it's from the movie Jason. What is the sit-up from? Do you remember there being a conversation about the genesis of that?
Stole it from Michael Myers in Halloween.
There you go. I like it.
I loved Halloween, and Mark did the sit-up, and I actually had suggested the sit-up originally. He did the sit-up in the head. It was his deal for the head snap, and it was born. But he would take a lot of people's, suggestions. I loved walking the ropes. One of the things going back, if you go back and you watch when Undertaker first debuted, I would write down every single match. And with the exception of the finish, he didn't do the same match twice on TV. A lot of guys at the time, they had their TV match. They were going to get their spots in. They were going to go out and have their match, and that was their match no matter who their opponent was. With Undertaker, we would always add a couple things and subtract a couple things in every match on TV so that he would be different. We always did the rope walk. We always did the tombstone, but those were the only two signatures that we tried to keep in on every match. Everything else was different. So subliminally, I think people like that, and I think that's another reason why Undertaker was so popular, because he was different. You didn't get the same thing every time you saw him.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's one of the things that resonated with everybody. Let's rapid fire some 1993 now. The Undertaker headlines the very first episode of Monday Night Raw on January 11th, 1993, in a victory over Damien Demento. So we're going to talk about the very first episode of Monday Night Raw and the creation of Raw on a future episode, I'm sure. But two things. One, why do you guys decide he's the headliner for the first show? And two, got any good Damien Demento stories?
Damien's crazier than batshit, man. Damien Demento was a guy that was on the independents at the time in the Northeast with this crazy look. Great body, crazy look. I like the gimmick. So we reached out to him, wanted to bring him in. We thought that we could actually do something with him. Monday Night Raw, the first show, it was Demento's debut, as a matter of fact. So thought, okay, let's see what he's got. Put him in there with the Undertaker, but it was kind of like Saba Simba. Once all the gimmick and all the shit came off and the bell rang, there just wasn't a whole lot of anything special there. So we just thought, to be different, Undertaker was the Undertaker, and he was a great attraction, so that was a good main event to put him up against a unique character for his first time ever.
All right, so the next major event in 1993 is the Royal Rumble. This one takes place in Sacramento on January 24th. It draws a 1.2 buy rate. This makes Titan's share about $2.85 million. And with the exception of Tuesday in Texas in 91, it's the lowest buy rate of any Titan pay-per-view in history. A drop of 10 to 15% from the previous low, which was the 92 Survivor Series, which also had a higher price tag. So it's a double whammy in that it's cheaper and less people are watching it. Meltzer wrote in the February 1st edition of The Observer, unannounced, uninvited, not involved in the match, comes out the nearly 8 feet tall and growing by the day, formerly known as Elegante, with a new beard, wearing what appeared to be an Ultimate Warrior old underwear, skin-colored body tights with muscles drawn on them. that the tailor accidentally made a few sizes too big. He got in the ring and did the stare down with Undertaker. The stare down wasn't bad, but then he threw the first punch. It reminded me of a show at the Meadowlands a few years back when Elegante and Sid Vicious were on opposite sides in a six-man, and everyone wanted to see them lock up. Once they locked up and Elegante threw the first blow, nobody wanted to see either of them ever again. Well, he threw the first blow, and that hurt it live. Johnny Gonzalez will draw a lot of money, but the amount of money he'll draw is directly proportional to the lack of actual body contact anyone sees. Anyway, he destroyed The Undertaker and threw him over in 30 minutes and 52 seconds. And Undertaker laid on the apron dead until a few minutes later when the ghost of Percy Pringle showed up with the urn and he limped out of the ring. So you guys are already kind of angling for WrestleMania 9 with Giant Gonzalez by Rumble 93. Do you guys know as soon as you sign Giant Gonzalez, goddamn, pal, let's put him with Taker? Is that always the plan? Like even signing him, hey, here's what we're going to start him with? Or how does Taker draw the short straw here?
The idea in signing Giant Gonzalez was obviously for the attraction of having a damn near 8-foot giant. The idea of putting him with Undertaker was it was a big man, it was a natural attraction, and we figured that Undertaker would be able to get a match out of him. Unfortunately, that's one feat that Undertaker just wasn't capable of doing.
Yeah.
I can't believe that I actually half-ass agree with Meltzer on his description of that. But fuck him anyway.
Roll Tide. We'll get there, talk about Meltzer a little later. So you guys start angling there on February 13th, 1993. It's the first WrestleMania 9 report where it's announced Undertaker is going to face Giant Gonzalez. On the house shows, he's beating Razor Ramon by countout. He's beating Bam Bam Bigelow. He's pinning IRS with the tombstone. There's our death and taxes gimmick. And then on the February 2nd edition, we get a comment from Dave Meltzer. It says, can you believe Titan now has 4 face managers? Paul Bearer, Sherry Martel, Jimmy Hart, and Slick, and only 2 heels, Mr. Fuji and Harvey Whippleman. And look at the 2 heels. They sure either need a new manager or to turn one of the old ones, since Sherry and Hart just turned, and Slick's character won't be turned, and Undertaker probably can't be turned. I don't think we'll see the latter. Little did we know, The Undertaker was always going to be able to flip-flop for the rest of his career. But it's interesting to me to bring this up here because there were, at this time, 6 managers. How many managers are there in the WWE now?
There is an advocate, sir. I am not a manager.
Isn't that crazy?
There you go. I've always been a big fan of managers, and I think that they enhance the right talent, and I think that there are some talent that may be limited with their verbal skills that could be main event top guys if they only had the right mouthpiece.
They took a European tour in February of 93, hitting England and Germany. Most of the cards look identical. The Undertaker spends a lot of time working with Papa Shango. In real life, Papa Shango and The Undertaker are pretty good buds. Do I have that right?
They're best of friends. Yes, they are. From way back.
I don't know how that comes about. Can you kind of catch everybody up?
Well, they both started down in Dallas, and they trained together. They shared a lot of common interests as far as motorcycles and gentlemen's establishments. So they just kind of hit it off, and were good friends from day one.
Okay, I guess we'll move along there. I don't guess you have any good Papa Shango Undertaker strip club stories you could share right now, do you?
Wow. I don't know that there's really any I can share, even at this point, but we had some good times back in the day. Undertaker was quite the there was a time, man, he knew exactly where to go, and everybody knew him, and you could walk in and be escorted right back to a VIP section of the bar, and nobody would mess with you. And we had a lot of fun back in the day.
Let me ask this. What does the Undertaker refer to those establishments as? Strip clubs, shoe show, ballet?
The bar.
So,
yeah, for us, it was just the bar.
So when Undertaker says, let's go to the bar, he's not talking about happy hour down at the Applebee's.
Well, nowadays he probably is. Back in the day, we knew where we were going.
So let's get into some fun stuff here. I guess before we do, we should mention he actually beat Ric Flair in Germany in February of '93, which has got to be a feather in the cap for the Undertaker at that time. But there is a little bit of a talent swap that happens in early '93, February, I believe, and it's with the WWF and USWA in Memphis. How does that come about from your best of your recollection?
Jerry Jarrett was up at WWF as a consultant, and he was working with us. And Jerry obviously was the promoter for the USWA there in Memphis and Nashville and that area. So we were using Jerry Lawler. We'd brought Jerry Lawler in to be a color commentator. Lawler, being the brains in the operation, had natural friction with Vince. And they had just a natural, immediate connection, and they immediately had friction and were very good on air. But Lawler, always the businessman, wasn't afraid to ask and threw out, hey, first it started with Vince and some different guys, but Memphis was someplace that we were going to utilize as a training ground to be able to send young talent there to learn how to work. And then it became, when they needed some help on some of their shows, where we would send talent down to help them draw a house. But Lawler just asked. And when you ask the boss and you're sitting in a audio booth, sure, pal, Bruce, get some talent down to Memphis. It's just one of those things.
It's one of those deals where I just like when you say that. So I'm sure we'll cover that USWA talent exchange a great deal in the future, but we'll cover it some more on this episode too. But first, hypothetically speaking, who would have ever guessed that when we first mentioned him on the steroid trial, when I said, hey, I don't know when we'll ever talk about him again, that Jerry Jarrett would be this over with the show and this popular on our show.
This is the most Jerry Jarrett's ever been over in his life, by God.
Well, as you know, several episodes back, I challenged everybody to go to Google, and I want you to do it right now, Bruce. And I want you to type in your Google machine, Jerry Jarrett. It's going to give you a pop-up, or a drop-down, rather, and it's going to give you 3 suggestions, or at least it does on my end. What's number 1 on your end, Bruce?
People, go to Google.com. And then when the little box comes up there,
they know
and you
how
type
Google
in
works.
Jerry Jarrett, you get Jerry Jarrett,
And what's second?
And then you get Jerry Jarrett chicken salad recipe.
Now, hypothetically, if you wanted to go ahead and show your love for the show, you can go to brucepritchard.com, and what just happens to be available right there, Mr. Jarrett?
Well, they have a shirt, and it's got, a recipe for the chicken salad, with the chicken, and, and you take the walnut, and, in the mayonnaise, and it's right there on the shirt. That's not a rib. They got those too, not a rib. And Conrad, I used to be over all of those there. No, how do you say no yob? Rib them. They got boxes of gimmicks. Why, they even have Dr. Tom Prichard shirts available over at brucepritchard.com. They got his famous Dr. Tom
pro wrestling camp, wanted dead or alive. Trust me, I'm a doctor. And then back on Bruce, do. And Bruce calls everybody that buys one of his shirts just to say thank you. You know. Huh?
BrucePrichard.com. Check it out right now. Let's get back to February 1993 on the Superstars tapings. We start to see Gonzalez saying he is going to bury the Undertaker tonight. And then on the house shows, we see the strongest advances in quite a while, per the Wrestling Observer newsletter. American crowds were slightly below average in most cities, and advances for this coming weekend on the West Coast are weak as well. However, word we get is the Undertaker-Yokozuna matches that start on the 19th have the strongest advances of any house show feud in about 10 months. We briefly talked about this on our 1994 Royal Rumble episode, but I'm curious, when did you guys know that he was going to be a big draw as a headliner?
Probably right about then, but it still hadn't been tested yet. So to throw him out there and to get that kind of a response was absolutely tremendous, because we had developed that attraction that we were looking for. So it was able to, have somebody else up there that you could put in the main event spot and draw.
Let's talk about February 25th. It happens in Memphis, Tennessee. It's the WWF USWA card. It draws 3,500 folks, which is pretty good. Here's the card. Typhoon defeats Skinner. Virgil defeats Terry Taylor. Crush defeats Papa Shango. The Undertaker defeats Yokozuna by disqualification. The Steiner brothers defeat the Beverly brothers. Kamala defeats Kim Chi. And then in the main event, Jerry Lawler defeats Jeff Gaylord, who was substituting for, do you recall?
No clue.
The WWF Intercontinental Champion, Shawn Michaels. Do you remember why Shawn wouldn't have showed up to this?
Absolutely no clue whatsoever. But that was more just that was a WWF card putting Lawler on it as...
No shit. Am I right? They say it's a joint, but it's Lawler.
It was...
I guess if they call it USWA, they can justify an announcer being in the main event.
There you go.
String of wrestler deaths. This is unfortunate, but it happens in February and March of 1993. Andre the Giant passed away on February 8th, 1993. How much time do you think The Undertaker would have been able to spend with Andre the Giant? They would have passed each other, right? Just briefly. I mean, they were both at WrestleMania 7.
Yeah, but it was very brief, and Andre wasn't really fond of big guys, and Taker kind of knew that and paid his respects and
just stayed out of the way.
Stayed out of the way.
What do you think Andre would have to say about what the Undertaker's been able to accomplish?
Good for him.
Was that the Undertaker or hashtag Kamala's penis right there?
Andre, I'm a giant.
Kerry Von Erich passed away on February 18th, and Dino Bravo on March 10th. So one of these by natural causes, the other two, not so much. In March, we start to see a series of house shows here, all of them with Yokozuna, and drawing to different, way different crowds. Here's an example. They're in Ontario and draw 2,200 folks. They're in South Carolina and draw 7,800. In Quebec, 4,800. In Miami, 1,850. St. Louis, 3,600. Toledo and Columbus, both 1,900. Denver, only 3,600. Do you want to talk about the stronghold? How about Pittsburgh, 9,000. Philadelphia, 8,700. Lots of, disparate ticket sales there. Let's talk about USWA a little bit more here. March 16th, they draw 4,500 folks to Louisville. And here, The Undertaker defeats Giant Gonzalez via countout. Meltzer wrote, the USWA drew what was reported to me as its biggest crowd in several years on March 16th in Louisville, of a near sellout to see Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. So even though we all kind of poke fun now at Giant Gonzalez, People were intrigued to see him with the Undertaker. So you guys were on to something at WrestleMania.
Well, it was the attraction. It's like the three-headed man at the circus. It was the Giant and the Phenom, the Undertaker. I think people wanted to see what was going to happen, but it was strictly an attraction-driven deal, man. It wasn't, hey, you're going to see a great match. It was kind of like, you're going to see these two guys in the ring.
I found this interesting. March 19th, so just a couple of weeks prior to WrestleMania 9, Undertaker worked double duty in New York, and he had a match with Yokozuna that finished by disqualification after about 4 minutes. There's a lot of interference here from Giant and Harvey. And then in the main event, I suppose, Undertaker defeats Giant Gonzalez by DQ after about 8 minutes when the Giant uses the urn as a weapon. And afterwards, Undertaker's put onto a stretcher before being attacked again by the Giant, but eventually sits up and the Giant clears from the ring. Meltzer wrote of this that Pat Patterson was at the show and was watching intently the Undertaker-Gonzalez match. Do you think he was assigned by Vince to go to this to say, God damn, pal, figure out how to make chicken salad?
No, it's just we were probably just in the area and just wanted to make those shows and see them. And from time to time, Pat and I would go out on house shows. A lot of times we would go unannounced and just show up to watch the house shows to get a feel of what people are buying and what they aren't buying. When you watch a show from backstage and people know that you're there, you may get one show versus if you just show up and see the show as an audience member. But there were also shows that we just went out because we wanted to see certain matches and we wanted to see certain things live.
So, of course, we've covered WrestleMania 9 in great detail. It's available in the archives now. Very quickly, it was April 4th, Caesar's Palace. It was outdoors. Undertaker gets the win by DQ. It's notable. It was his only win by disqualification. They used chloroform in the finish. Not the best match ever. Meltzer gave it 1.25 stars. Meltzer makes note in this WrestleMania recap that Gonzalez can and will be a short-term draw if he's handled correctly, just based on his size. And he says, quote, the problem is that he can't work. The Undertaker matches thus far have been terrible, although give the WWF credit for getting the two in the ring for test runs before WrestleMania, because maybe they'll at least be able to practice their way into a watchable match. If they had gone out there live on pay-per-view for the first time ever, it could have been really ugly. And he also wrote, I found this interesting, that Gonzalez is a diabetic and has terrible knees. How much of a topic of conversation was that in the back amongst the office of the boys?
Well, unfortunately, a lot, because there was an issue with him bleeding. He couldn't bleed either. That there was some kind of issue with that. And yeah, he had also low blood sugar too. Some kind of weird deal he had to eat. He had a lot of medical issues for a Giant. So we were aware of all of them. His knees, that's what cut his basketball career short. So add on all of that, on top of being a Giant, having the Giant disease, you know the name of that. And his lifespan was one that they didn't expect him to live very long.
Well, it wound up winning the worst feud of the year in the Observer for 1993, and it won as a runner-up for the worst match, Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. But WWF still goes with it coming out of WrestleMania 9, and he starts to work the house show loops in a big way. Or at least that was the plan, because he wound up being replaced by Yokozuna. He missed a lot of dates on the European tour. You guys were all over here, England, Scotland, Belgium, Italy, and he's replaced by Yokozuna. Do you remember what happened here, why he had to be replaced?
I just think it was health issues taking their toll on him, and he couldn't travel for long periods of time. Being in WCW, they didn't travel him nearly the schedule that they had in the WWF, and he just didn't hold up well on the road.
From the Wrestling Observer newsletter, April 26th edition, Dave writes, Gonzalez did the first clean jobs of his career for The Undertaker on the European tours this past week. When do you guys make the decision, hey, we know he's a giant, we know he's never lost, oh well, we got to move on, we're going to beat him?
When the bell rang.
Oh, God, thank you for that. Okay, let's get going. We're in May again. This time we're doing house shows against Gonzalez. Most of these are won by disqualification. They do a Superstars taping where The Undertaker defeats Bam Bam Bigelow with a choke slam after Tatanka prevented Bigelow from leaving ringside. But most of the time, he's still working with Gonzalez. This is from The Observer in June. Quote, Vince McMahon resigned as president of Titan Sports approximately 2 weeks ago in a major news item that has been largely kept hush-hush. McMahon, who is both president and CEO of the largest wrestling company in the U.S., apparently had company control transferred to wife Linda McMahon a few weeks ago, either on or before May 14th. Vince remains CEO of Titan Sports and will remain as a television personality. Titan has not publicly released this information in press release fashion, although several sources within the organization have admitted that it was true and that the public relations department has confirmed the story. Aside from the obvious speculation regarding this somehow being tied to the ongoing federal investigation, no other details or significance is known. However, from the outside, there doesn't seem to be any significant change in operation of the company, and many employees of the company weren't even aware of the switch in the company presidency as of press time. I only bring this up because I don't know when we'll talk about it again. What's the rationale here behind the scenes?
That Vince took the title of CEO and gave Linda the title of president. Prior to that, Vince was the president, Linda was vice president.
I just said that, but why? Is it strategy?
Because we had not previously had a CEO, and oh God, it was during Lisa Wolf times, which we will bring up her again at some point. Lisa Wolf was the HR person at the time, and Lisa had a background with the NFL for a short period of time, and she was horrible. But she was all about perception, and she was very big on titles, and she felt that Vince needed to be a CEO. Vince, you need a CEO. And you need to be more than a president. You need to be the CEO. So all they did was there was no change in anything other than semantics. Vince became the CEO. Linda became the president. Before that time, we'd never had a CEO. That's all it was semantics.
So you don't think there was any sort of strategy here of, hey, we're going to get sued, or, hey, I'm going to jail? None of that. This is just Lisa Wolf wanted him to have a different title.
Yeah, I mean, how would that affect anything anyway? He was still CEO. He was still the top officer of the company. Linda was still second in command. So but prior to that, he had been president. She had been vice president. Now he was CEO. She was president. It was simply semantics and changes of titles. New titles, same jobs.
On the June 8th.
And then when Vince became chairman, when Vince wanted someone else to be CEO, he became chairman. So it was just, he's still the boss. He was still in charge of everything and still there and still the man.
In June, the Observer reports that the WWF negotiated a deal with a concert promotions company in Japan to run shows in Japan on its own. Prior to this, most shows had been co-promoted, or at least that's the way I understood it. But at this point, this concert promotions company has an affiliation with a local promoter who's doing work with the WWF in London. So now they're starting to do market research on the Japanese wrestling market, and it's believed that Hogan won't work for the WWF in Japan because it would mess with his deal with New Japan. So Undertaker and Bam Bam Bigelow would then become the biggest names, because at that point, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Lex Luger didn't really mean a lot in Japan. And they also believed it would be difficult to sell tickets without a Japanese babyface on top, so they need a mean, nasty heel on top. Do you remember these conversations about running shows on your own and that The Undertaker would probably need to be the guy to headline?
there was a lot of speculation as to who would be the guy to headline, because it was, it's interesting. The Japanese will tell you that you can't run Japan without a Japanese babyface. The experts, media experts, will tell you that you can't run Japan without a Japanese babyface. However, the biggest events that WWE ran in Japan were the ones that they did on their own, without the traditional Japanese babyface and working with a Japanese office. They presented that perception to people so that you would have to use one of the offices in Japan to promote your shows, and so that they would make money off of it. But the same argument was made when we started going to Germany and when we started going to the UK. You got to use local talent. You have to use a top guy from here if you want to draw. The international audience, they want that American import. And that's what they want. They have the Japanese there all the time. And that's what they were telling us, that essentially we needed to present our product, the same product that we present in the United States, the same product that is exported to them. When we would go there, before we would traditionally do that, we would give them a Japanese babyface and work with a Japanese company, and it would do okay. But it was a bunch of shit. Different people with different opinions on what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, we had a lot of different people giving their opinions on how to promote internationally.
So the first appearance of The Undertaker in Memphis on a USWA show and a strictly USWA show is on June 7th. It draws 1,750 folks for about a $10,000 gate, which is roughly double the weekly average. And Undertaker goes to a double DQ, challenging Southern champion Brian Christopher in the main event. I only kept this in my notes because, motherfucker, I know you've got a Brian Christopher story.
Yeah, another one I can't tell. Brian Christopher and Undertaker. God, can you imagine that? Think about that. And Brian Christopher was a top guy in Memphis at the time. And he's all of about 5'3", and Undertaker being 6'7". It was when Vince finally met Brian Christopher, looked at all of us like going, wait a minute. We put him in the ring on top with The Undertaker? God damn, pal. Yeah. We did some crazy things to appease people back then, but
no. That's not what I want to hear. Brian Christopher was a crazy motherfucker, and don't you sit here and deny it. Let's hear it. Good.
I'm not going to deny it. He's a fucking lunatic, and there's a reason why Brian Christopher, never made it beyond Memphis, Tennessee, and could sustain it in a big company, because he just has a lot of bad habits, and he's not the most dependable son of a bitch in the world.
I'm not wanting you to shit on the guy. Just tell us a funny story.
You mean like the time that he got caught with the CD of cocaine in Vancouver or someplace, and his excuse was, well, I thought we had done it all, or something like that. I don't know. It was really some crazy, stupid excuse like that. It couldn't have been.
Why not, pal?
Why couldn't it have been? Because we had already done it all. I was like, what the hell? But
what is a CD of cocaine? I guess
it was in a CD disc.
Oh wow!
And they found drugs in a CD disc. And he said, no, it couldn't have been because it was somewhere else or something like that. And it was one of those crazy, stupid excuses like, well, of course, no, there wasn't any full containers of alcohol. We drank them all. It was like when Kid Rock landed in Vancouver and they brought all the dogs on and they said, where are the drugs? They said, we just took them all. There is no more pot. We smoked it all. So that was kind of Brian's excuse when he got popped on the border, is to, no, it can't be true. We did it all. But I tell you what, back in that time, Brian Christopher was being heralded as one of the top independent talent out there that had not been, picked up by either company. And he was a hell of a talent back in the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was always entertained by him as a fan. I was not anti him at all. I just know that he had a reputation for, well, I mean, he likes to party. So I don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to hear a fun story. You gave us one. Let's get on with it. Let's talk about the time that Dave Meltzer went to a house show, and he wrote about it in the Observer. They were at the Oakland Coliseum on June 25th. About 4,000 folks were there, $44,000 house. Kids' tickets were discounted to $3 a ticket. He says, crowd was a lot more lively than any show in about a year, and it was much better than a usual house show, although 2 of the matches were worse than horrible. Undertaker beat Johnny Gonzalez by DQ in 5 minutes and 36 seconds, and this is the worst match I've seen in many years. Undertaker was knocked out by the worst chair shot in history. None of this was Undertaker's fault either. I don't think it was possible for Gonzalez to actually get worse. -4 stars. When did you guys realize, time to future endeavor, Mr. Gonzalez?
Well, Vince hates to give up. It's a challenge. So the worst thing you can do if you feel that something isn't working and that somebody may not have it and Vince feels otherwise is to let him know that. Because by God, come hell or high water, he's going to prove you wrong. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how much money it costs. It doesn't matter at whose expense it is expended upon. He's going to prove you wrong. And I feel that maybe some of us, counted the giant out early on, and he was determined to make it work. Until finally, just couldn't make it work anymore. It just was, and I want to say it was probably the Undertaker coming to him and saying, I've done all I can do. I can't do no more.
So in the August 9th edition of the Observer, Dave writes, major roster cuts will be made over the next few weeks. The WWF will be cutting back to 1 house show per night, with the final night of double shots being August 15th. Among the names who will either be cut, leaving, or receiving few dates and staying under contract, but mostly working indies, are Damian Demento, Terry Taylor, Bob Backlund, Tito Santana, Mr. Fuji, Kamala, Johnny Gonzalez, Virgil, Blake Beverly, Doink the Clown 2, which is Steve Kern, Papa Shango, Ted DiBiase, and Jim Duggan. That's a lot of famous names right there. What was your relationship like with Terry Taylor at this point?
Not really. I didn't really have one other than, we worked together. That was about it.
What time is it? Cock-a-doodle-doo time. So for most of the house shows after SummerSlam, they start advertising that it's going to be Undertaker Yokozuna, and the plan for SummerSlam is a rest in peace match with Johnny Gonzalez, which is kind of fun because it's the Undertaker's gimmick, and kind of fun because the end is near for Johnny Gonzalez. We've kind of, beat him up a little bit here. But compare him to the Ultimate Warrior, because we started this show off by you really crapping all over the Ultimate Warrior, and it feels like we've done that a lot now for the Giant Gonzalez. If you had to pick who was a better worker, the Ultimate Warrior or Giant Gonzalez?
Oh my God, I'm actually going to say Warrior may be a better worker than somebody. I'd have to give the nod to the Warrior because he drew a lot more money and at least looked better in the ring. So Ultimate Warrior would get the nod.
Now, when you're talking about money, when we're talking about the Ultimate Warrior, from what I understand, he was pretty hard to deal with about money. Do I have that right?
That could be, some rumor and innuendo to that effect.
Well, there's no rumor and innuendo. The First Family Mortgage is pretty easy to deal with about money. Wouldn't you say, Bruce?
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. A lot easier to deal with than the Warrior.
So, hypothetically, if the Ultimate Warrior was going to be our pitch man for 1FMC.com, what might that sound like?
From sea to shining sea, only one force reigns supreme. Every being in this universe knows that's First Family Mortgage. It is the ultimate choice for saving your family money. Get a better interest rate. Get rid of your PMI. Pay your home off sooner. Upgrade your home with no money out of pocket. Lower your monthly payments. Stop making your minimum payments on your credit cards and just pay them off at once and for all. Just call 888-425-0105. That's 888-425-0105. It only takes 10 warrior minutes to find out how much money you can save for free at 1FMC.com. You don't need perfect credit, but the time to act is now. If you need to save money, do not call mere mortal bankers, for they do not have the vision for the answers that you are looking for here on Earth. Only First Family Mortgage can help at 1FMC.com. Save hundreds, save thousands. Save now and for eternity with the ultimate family, the ultimate savior, the ultimate mortgage. First Family Mortgage, 1FMC.com.
NMLS number 65084, Equal Housing Lender. There's no way anybody fast forwards these fucking commercials. Okay, let's talk about SummerSlam.
Excuse me while I wipe off my microphone.
Yep. I get it.
Matt, could you? Okay, let me ask you this: if we were a video thing right now,
oh yeah, people would have wigged out on.
Did I entertain you a little bit on that one,
dude? It's hilarious. It's hilarious. Leading up to SummerSlam '93, Undertaker missed a bunch of the shows except for Anaheim, where he was limited in what he could do. Are you ready for this? Because of an injury from playing softball. Not sure if it was a bad leg injury or broken ribs, as we've heard both. In San Francisco and Stockton, Undertaker was at the building and did a walk-in during the Randy Savage, Johnny Gonzalez horrendous matches, but didn't make any contact. Now, I had to do a double take here, because usually in wrestling, when you hear about a guy getting jacked up during softball, it's about Sid. But here, it's Undertaker. What happened?
I think he got hit with a ball. I don't really remember, but I think the booking committee hit him with a ball.
Okay,
I don't remember, folks. I really and truly don't.
SummerSlam was voted the worst match. Of course, was Undertaker Gonzalez, and they show the match in 8 minutes and 4 seconds. Meltzer writes, "I'm not sure what a rest in peace match even is after seeing this, other than a moniker for a match that was sure to die the minute the bell rang. Undertaker was limited by an injury. Gonzalez is limited because he's the worst wrestler ever and getting worse by the day. The only thing positive is Gonzalez gave Undertaker better chair shots than he did at the house shows. After 5 minutes, Paul Bearer showed up. Remember, he'd been suspended since the last Angle ran, injuring him, with a black wreath, and clotheslined Harvey Whippleman and got the urn. Bearer picked up the urn to give the Undertaker his magical powers back." I can't believe I'm writing this. "And after 5 clotheslines, followed by a clothesline off the top rope. After the match, Gonzalez gave Whippleman a chokeslam, so he's turning face. Most feel the reason is Gonzalez had committed to Hogan if Hogan were to get something started as Hogan's top heel foe. Boy, would those matches be something to look forward to. And this muddies the water for it with Gonzalez turning on a pay-per-view. -1 star. What do you remember about this SummerSlam 1993 match? Is this better or worse than WrestleMania 9?
How long was the match again?
8 minutes.
And 4 seconds?
Yep.
It's about 8 minutes and 1 second too long. It was a rest in peace match. The symbolism behind it was whoever lost would rest in peace and go bye-bye. It wasn't good. It was, unfortunately, a case where every time that, bless his little heart, Johnny Gonzalez worked, it just got worse and worse. So Vince thought maybe if we do something with him as a babyface, he can smile and children will want to get their pictures taken next to the 8-foot giant, and we can have a nice picture-taking attraction or something in the lobby.
Lex Luger returned on the September 27th television tapings in New Haven, and he got the third biggest reaction behind Undertaker and Razor Ramon. So Luger, despite being pushed as the tippy-top guy, was still not getting the reactions people wanted.
Okay.
So they start setting records, which is a surprise to me, given the time. But we know that this Undertaker Yokozuna match has been proven to be successful. Well, they keep doing it, and in San Jose, they break a record for the all-time gate that was set just 5 weeks earlier by AAA, and they do this in the brand-new 20,000-seat San Jose Arena, and the crowds continue to increase, and people are digging it. On top is Yokozuna and Undertaker. And they go 8 minutes and 53 seconds. Meltzer gives it 2.5 stars. So while it's not a 5-star match, it is putting butts in seats, pal. The B shows, even with Undertaker and Yokozuna on top, later in the month, are only doing 800 to 1,500. So it goes back to what we talked about a minute ago. There's pockets of the country where business is hotter than hell. And then other pockets, they just can't give damn tickets away. SummerSlam, though, or Survivor Series, rather, in the Boston Gardens, did draw a legit sellout of 15,509 folks. And the gate is around $180,000. Supposedly, the show sells out in about an hour when tickets were first put on sale. Do you remember Survivor Series 93 being a huge financial success for you guys?
It was good, and it was... I do remember the sellout because it was the first one like that in a long time, so it felt good. But as you just pointed out, there were pockets of the country, and particularly in the Northeast, where we were still red hot, and we were drawing better than what traditionally was not the stronghold. In the Midwest, we just were dying. And
Florida, I saw, died, but California was doing well. The Northeast was doing well. One of the things I wanted to ask you about this Survivor Series, and I hadn't seen this a lot in my research since we've been doing this show, but Meltzer wrote, the show sold out in about an hour when tickets were first put on sale. Here it is. Although the building had actually been more than half sold out before the box office even opened by pre-sale mail orders. Tell everybody about this concept, because that doesn't exist anymore. But a pre-sale mail order, what would that have looked like back in 1993?
We would have gone to the pocket of fans that had obviously purchased tickets before in that area and let them know, especially in the not just the tri-state area, because Massachusetts is over further east, but we would go to people in that area and that had purchased tickets before through Ticketmaster, and we would send out blasts to them in the mail. Okay, there's snail mail with the mailman delivering things to their home, offering them tickets for the live event. We also had addresses from folks from the cable companies who had purchased pay-per-views before in the area, and give them the first opportunity to buy tickets and be ahead of the public on sale date.
I'm just fascinated by that because, now we have pre-sale codes and stuff like that and everything's online, but through the mail, man, that's old school. I'm curious, and no one cares about this but me, but when you guys would pre-sale tickets like that, did they have to fill out the credit card information and mail it back, or were they taking checks at the box office?
No, they were taking checks at the box office. And
amazing.
I'm sure they did credit cards and stuff too, but probably most of it was checks and things of that nature back in those days. Nowadays, all I have to do is put a tweet, put something on the tweet. And
yeah, there you go. It's off tweet. Survivor Series is Lex Luger and the Steiners with Undertaker defeating Ludwig Borga, Yokozuna, Jacques Rougeau, and Crush. 27 minutes and 59 seconds. Borga pins Rick in 5 minutes to win the first fall. The finish was supposed to be Borga rolling through a crossbody off the top rope. What it was so messed up that it couldn't even be described, according to Dave Meltzer. Savage comes out and Crush jumps on him after, and then he gets counted out for a second fall after 6.5 minutes. Luger pins Jacques with a forearm in 2 minutes, and during this fall, Vince McMahon made the comment that Borga may be the wrestler of the 90s. Meltzer writes, God help us for the next 7 years. Yokozuna pins Scott in 2 minutes and 53 seconds with a leg drop. And he writes, the most heated part of the match came when the Undertaker finally tagged in 3 minutes into the fifth fall. Yokozuna kept doing moves and Undertaker would sit up. Undertaker even sat up after a bonsai. Both men were then counted out at 6 minutes and 29 seconds. This left Luger and Borga, and then Luger pinned Borga after a forearm in 4 minutes and 36 seconds. Not bad, but hardly a memorable pay-per-view main event. It is kind of weird to think about this selling out so quickly, and that shit is the main event. What do you remember about that match?
Well, the most heat in that match was not Undertaker tagging in. The most heat was the week before when Vince asked Undertaker to put the American flag inside of his overcoat.
I got to hear that story.
You know, you had the All-Americans and Lex Luger's team and Undertaker being on it. You had the Steiners over there, and then you had Undertaker, and Vince says, oh, damn, pal. When you get out there and Luger introduces you as one of the All-Americans, and you just open up the coat, and there's the red, white, and blue. And Taker's looking at him like, are you fucking ribbing me? Not a rib, pal. No. but Taker really did look at him like, are you fucking ribbing me? You want to dress me up in red, white, and blue now? Just the lining of your coat. It'll be great. So they had a coat made for him. They took his coat and they lined it with the Stars and Stripes. It was like an old colonial flag. And Taker came out, he did it for the interview, and he did it for the match, and the next day or whatever the next tapings were, Vince comes to him and says, hey, you know, we want to do something with the jacket. And Taker says, well, yeah, about that. I said, what do you mean? I says, well, my dog kind of ate the lining of the jacket. What do you mean? Yeah, my dog got a hold of the jacket. Craziest thing, too, he only ate the lining. And it never made the light of day after that. So.
My goodness.
That was the most heat. But it was, at the time, man, Luger was All-American. Borga, we had high hopes for Ludwig Borga. He was the real deal. He was a friggin' Nazi, too, which we didn't know until kind of midway into his reign there. He had a swastika tattoo and a SS tattoo that he would cover up. And one day, I forget where the hell we were. I was sitting there looking and go, is that an SS tattoo? And sure enough, it was. So Vince politely asked him to cover all that shit and never let it see the light of day.
Well, I mean, that's a fair request.
Yeah. Good God. Can you imagine? I mean, and you know, obviously it was enough that he hit it all the time. But this one time he was in shorts and I saw it on his leg. I was like, what the hell? But yeah, he was a shooting Nazi. He's a shoot Nazi.
That's not something I expected for us to talk about today.
Never know when we're going to talk about him again.
No, you don't. The annual Thanksgiving weekend show of Madison Square Garden drew a huge house, 12,700 folks, 220,000 at the gate. You want to guess what was in the main event?
Yokozuna?
In a casket match, baby. I mean, let's play the hits. On December 20th edition of the Wrestling Observer, Dave writes that Titans Television leading up to the Royal Rumble has come to this. The 3 undercard matches will be Undertaker versus Yokozuna in a casket match, and it's being billed as Undertaker's only title shot. which I thought was interesting. And we've covered the rest of kind of that episode. If you'd like to hear it, it's the Royal Rumble 1994. It is available in the archives. There's lots of the sky is falling stuff in the end of the 1993 edition of the Observers, both on the WCW side and the WWF side. How bad do you think business really was at that time? Was it a topic of conversation? Because you guys are just a few years removed from being white hot, and now here, not so much.
It was a tough few years. It was, there were moments where we just didn't know. But at the same time, having weathered that storm through, anybody that's been in the business for a while, you would go through these cycles, and Vince always hated that too. God damn, I don't want to hear about cycles. But the business goes through cycles of popularity, and it goes through cycles of being red hot, and then it cools off a little bit. Well, we hadn't just cooled off. I mean, we were cold, and we were fighting for everything that we had, and it was a battle every single day. Just not really sure if we were going to be there next year. And Vince was taking money out of his personal accounts and floating the company, taking $6 million in and putting $6 million into the company of his own money to keep it going. So there were some tough times. There were moments where we didn't know, but at the same time, if you've been in the business any length of time, you knew it was going to come back around.
Let me ask this. When he's doing these cash infusions as an owner, is there ever any consideration of, let's take on a partner, an investor?
There probably was, but I don't think that his pride ever would have allowed him to truly take on an equal partner.
Yeah.
So, and he had the money, so he was going to fund it himself. He was rolling the dice, and he was going to continue. He was going to, put it this way, Vince was going to lose everything he had before he was going to go out and ask for anybody else's.
There you go. Well, it starts to look kind of bleak when the buy rate comes in for Survivor Series, which I thought was interesting. It's worth mentioning that the ratings for the Survivor Series special, like leading into it, was up like 20%. So that's a good indicator. So you start to think, okay, hey, we're turning things around. Then the buy rate comes in, and it falls 41%. So Survivor Series 92 to 93 falls off a cliff, 41%. People have to be hitting the panic button at that point. Am I wrong?
Not really, believe it or not. It was a building process. There was, at that point, there were questions, okay, because they were thinking of Luger. That was the plan going up into SummerSlam, man. Go with Luger. Then we didn't go with Luger. So now it's, where do we go from here? We got a heel champion, a monster champion. He's doing good business, but he was doing good business with Undertaker. But Vince wasn't ready to make that move with Undertaker either. So he was still looking for that traditional babyface, the guy everybody can get around and rally behind. So the jury was still out, I guess is the best way to put it, and business was tough.
So let's do the end of the year Observer Awards. Best gimmick, number 1, Undertaker. Worst feud of the year, number 1, Undertaker Gonzalez. Worst match of the year, number 2 is Undertaker Gonzalez at SummerSlam. The honorable mention is Undertaker Gonzalez at WrestleMania. Most overrated, Undertaker got an honorable mention. He's number 4th on the most charismatic list. He is an honorable mention for both best babyface and most unimproved. Do you remember anybody besides Mauro Ranallo talking about Wrestling Observer ratings in the locker room?
No.
Let's talk about the Underfaker. Now, this kind of comes about, correct me if I have this right, through essentially a partnership with the USWA. And one of the knocks against the WWF for so long was that they refused to recognize other promotions and that they even existed. And then wrestlers would get essentially a complete reset once they made it to New York in the big time. And their history was kind of just swept under the rug. The partnership with the USWA started to put a crack in the foundation as far as this point of view from fans, especially in Memphis. So while the USWA wasn't mentioned on WWF television, their wrestlers played a major role in Memphis for the USWA. And through this, of course, we know benefiting Jerry Lawler is the primary thing for any USWA or Memphis angle. And he debuted, as we've mentioned, on December of 1992 as an announcer for the WWF. And the first crossover that we mentioned earlier was at the Louisville Gardens in 1992. And we see more of this in 94. But one of the first things that caught my eye in doing my research here, and this is rumor and innuendo, was that when the Pyramid first opened in Memphis, you guys were running a show there. It was August of 92. And there's a fellow in the second row throwing out challenges to the wrestlers, including Bret Hart. And that challenger was USWA star Jeff Jarrett. Do you remember hearing about this?
Well, yeah, we put him there.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. So even back in that segment of 92, that was always the plan. But when was the plan going to be for Jarrett in 92 to be involved on the WWF side? Was it always just to build for Memphis, or was there ever a vision?
No, the stuff we did in Memphis was strictly for Memphis. And when we went there, that was for WWE, and we would help them out by rubbing their guys up against our guys at our shows. That was it. And
the goal was, let's use them as like a training ground of sorts. So when you needed to send somebody down there for some polish, you could?
Actually, we had sent a couple guys down there to train. Colin Scotts was one of them, who was a Australian rugby player. He may have been, there may have been someone else, but he was the first one that we sent down there to train in Memphis. And we just looked at it. Hey, you guys say you can train wrestlers? Okay, here you go. Make them a star. But it didn't work out because they trained them the Memphis wrestling stuff, and that wasn't what Vince was looking for. But the stuff that we did in Memphis, that was strictly only in Memphis. And then in Louisville, those were just strictly market-specific things.
I mention this because we've gotten lots of questions about it. It's the first time you see Mr. McMahon, the heel version, the heel persona of Vince McMahon, the television character. This is on YouTube if you'd like to see it. September of 1993, I believe, is when you start to see some of these heel promos on USWA television. It's worth going out of your way to see. And The Undertaker is a guy they leaned on to draw houses down there. So we'll kind of put a bow on USWA for a little bit. Obviously, 93, 94, man, it's a rough period for the WWF, and The Undertaker's bearing the brunt of that with some really bad matches. That terrible match with Yokozuna at the Rumble in 94, those two horrible Gonzalez matches.
I thought the match at the Royal Rumble was great.
Yeah, it wasn't. Either way, he survives it. And I can't find anything on it necessarily officially, but I want to freestyle for you about 1990. I believe 94 is when we first started to see the formation of the Bone Street Crew. His kind of group of guys that Taker hung out with and he traveled with, and they started to get the BSK tattoos. And this is around the same time that you start to see the seeds of the clique coming together. Do I have that right, that would have been 94 when the BSK are first being put together?
I'd go back to whenever Papa came in and Taker and Papa were traveling together, and then the Godwins and guys like that, Savio. Those are all the guys that hung around and hung out.
And it seems like Yokozuna was a big part of that too. You didn't mention him. But
yes. He was.
Was there ever any consideration to making that BSK clique of friends an on-screen thing, or was it always something Vince dismissed?
No, that was just something that was a backstage deal. That was just something amongst the guys.
But why never a consideration for making it online, out in front on TV?
Well, there was never a consideration to make the Click anything on TV either until many, many, many years later. But it was just something that was backstage that he didn't feel was, plus the participants, he didn't see how Undertaker and Savio Vega in front of the camera, how that was going to work, or the different guys that were all a part of it. How do you explain that the hog farmers and Undertaker are part of a crew?
Well, you turn them evil and call it the Ministry of Darkness, and then they sacrifice people and put them on a cross.
Well, no, that was Midian.
January 24th in the Observer, it's reported that New Japan was negotiating to make The Undertaker a semi-regular character. Do you remember those conversations? And at that point, since business was kind of down, do you remember Vince being open to kind of lightening the load from an overhead standpoint?
No, and they might have been talking about it, but it never got serious enough with us to anything more than talking stages. Those guys, whenever you hear those rumors of the Japanese stuff, that's always indicative of somebody over in Japan wanting to get things out. And they usually go to the fake news wrestling media people and put those things out. That's my new term now, fake news. Dave Silva, that's a shout out to you. Much love, buddy. He's our fake news guy.
Have you been eating?
Why do the guys named Dave all do fake news?
Have you been eating pineapple?
My homie, Dave Silva, vato. We had so much fun with Dave Silva. We're going to talk about that later on, man.
So Titan Sports holds a press conference on January 27th in Tokyo with Sato and J.J. Dillon officially announcing the Japanese dates that had already been reported. It was a 4-city tour they were calling Japan Mania, with each individual show being named a town, like Osaka Mania, Yokohama Mania. There weren't any lineups announced or ticket prices or days the tickets went on sale, or the arenas or anything of substance other than, hey, we're coming. And
Tokyo Mania.
Meltzer writes,
Nippon Mania.
Only The Undertaker has a significant following in Japan, but even that is limited to hardcore fans. And overall, he's not among the top 10 most popular foreign workers, according to a recently released shoot poll, which I don't even know what a shoot poll is. I'm reading probably Wade Keller. So let's run through the Royal Rumble 1994. Actually, we're not going to. It's available in the archives now, but you will hear about the worst match and what won the worst match, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter. It was The Undertaker versus Yokozuna. I've always been curious here. In kayfabe, when 30 motherfuckers run out of the back as heels and double team and triple team and 10-man team and 20-man team and just gangbang the shit out of The Undertaker here, why did no baby faces come make the save?
He's a dead man, motherfucker. He has no friends.
Well, he died that night. You guys murdered him and sent him to heaven. Yes, that's real. It happened. It's on our Royal Rumble 1994 episode, available in the archives. Now, behind the scenes, of course, the deal is he's been hurt, and he wants to take some time off to heal a little bit, and he's going to have a baby on the way. So he asked for some time off to spend with the baby. Vince had no problem granting that. Would that be fair to say?
Sure.
So he's taking some time off, and the next time we see anything about The Undertaker is in the May 30th edition of The Observer. In Smoky Mountain Wrestling, it's written, Bryan Lee has changed his hair color and started growing a small beard to get ready for his evil Undertaker role. Bryan Lee was backstage preparing for his Undertaker evil twin role. Based on television, it appears he'll be managed by Ted DiBiase. So we're tuning up for the Underfaker here, and he debuts at television tapings on May 24th in Canton, Ohio, and then the following day he's in Erie, Pennsylvania. He does have Ted DiBiase as a heel manager, and he's wrestling as The Undertaker. Meltzer writes, Lee's been made up to look like The Undertaker with his hair dyed reddish and grown long and stringy and wearing makeup, even practicing copying Undertaker's walk. Based on reports we got from the shows, there were definitely some fans, but they were in the minority, who believed that Lee was the original Undertaker. There were loud BS chants in at least one of the cities, which will have to be dubbed over before this airs. Supposedly, most of the fans realize once the match starts, this isn't the original Undertaker. And when he does interviews, it gives it away to all those that were there live. But even so, even with DiBiase, he received a lot more cheers than boos just because of the entrance music. However, we're told on interviews they're going to dub Mark Calloway's voice onto the track, so it creates confusion among the fans. So he will have Calloway's voice on the interviews. When the match is there, supposedly the angle will be something to the effect of the heel announcer will claim it's the real Undertaker, and the face announcer won't be sure. Lee's hair is in front of his face during the entire match, but at the finish, he lifts his hair up for a brief minute with the idea being, if you weren't sure, now you're sure. Naturally, this will lead to the Undertaker confronting him to an Undertaker versus Undertaker match, most likely at SummerSlam. We're told the long-term deal is for Lee to turn on DiBiase and the two Undertakers be together. So there's some rumor and innuendo for you from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, but what say you?
God, I don't even know where to start. The funny thing is that because somebody wrote it down that it is forever believed as fact. Well, first of all, with Undertaker being out for a while, the discussion becomes, how do we bring Undertaker back? What do we do? Who is the opponent? Who's the right guy for the Undertaker to come back? Now, the natural thing is to do something with Yokozuna, but weren't necessarily really ready for that just yet. And the discussion was, who do we have ready for the Undertaker? And somebody might have made a comment along the lines of, well, it would be nice if we had another Undertaker, type character to face the Undertaker. And Bryan Lee and Undertaker were good friends. And I had recently been around Bryan, and people had mistaken Bryan for the Undertaker when we were out. Because they both had the same hair, they had the same beard. And I started laughing. I said, what if we had the Undertaker? What do you mean? So what if we make another Undertaker? And I got pictures. I had Bryan send pictures in and all this stuff and call Taker. I said, what do you think about this? The idea being that you announce that the Undertaker is returning, and the announcement is made by the guy who originally financed the Undertaker coming into the WWE, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Right.
And by God, I'm bringing him back. I've got the Undertaker, and I've bought him. He's bought and paid for. So without the comparison of Mark Calloway standing next to Bryan Lee, a lot of people thought that Bryan Lee was the Undertaker. So we had a tattoo expert come in, and we had tattoos put on Bryan Lee's arm, the exact same tattoos as the Undertaker. As a matter of fact, Jerry Lawler sat at the makeup station with Bryan Lee and drew and put color in the tattoos because we didn't think that the tattoo artists that had put on the temporary tattoos that they looked good enough. And Lawler sat there and said, I can fix that. And Lawler sat there with a pen and made the tattoos on Bryan Lee's arms.
Wow.
And it was, you talk about a great, Jerry Lawler is a magnificent artist, but Lawler did a lot of that work. So the idea was you bring back the Undertaker, and Bryan Lee never cut a fucking promo, Dave Meltzer. The voice dub was always the Undertaker in the live houses everywhere. Bryan never opened his mouth and cut promos. That was always an Undertaker dub. And that's why I get so upset when I hear that name come out of your mouth, because he gets it from somebody who was there, who sends him a report, and all of a sudden it's fact. But we thought, well, shit, if we could hide it enough. We even talked about doing the matches in like a purple hue so that you could disguise them even more.
Wow.
So that you never really knew. And that when DiBiase came out, man, it was so disguised. You thought, shit, I'm looking at the Undertaker. There was even thought at times about having the Undertaker play the Underfaker. You know what I mean? So you're really confused now. You got Mark Calloway out there who is playing the, yeah. So the problem was that in between our times, Taker had gotten more tattoos, the real Taker. So it's like, shit, we've already debuted this other guy. He's got the one arm, and people hadn't seen the other tattoos.
Nobody thought to call Undertaker and say, don't get any more tattoos.
You know, when Taker got his first tattoo, I told him, dude, you probably just ruined your career right there. Why would you do that? Don't get any, whatever you do, don't get any more tattoos. That was my advice to him in Binghamton, New York. I'll never forget it till he listened to me. But the idea was a few weeks for the Undertaker to be out there.
Hang on, let's circle back. Why did you think he would end his career if he got a tattoo?
Well, because it was a tattoo of himself with the skull and crossbones and everything, and I thought, now you can't do anything else if this Undertaker thing doesn't work out for you, kid. You're now branded with this fucking tattoo. What are you thinking, you big dumb red-headed son of a bitch? Yeah. Needless to say, he didn't take my advice. And I think, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think it's worked out all right for him.
It worked out okay. So I think
it worked out okay.
The plan was to spend a few weeks with Undertaker.
The plan was to spend a few weeks with the Undertaker. And like I said, we even talked about switching them out and actually having the real Undertaker be the Undertaker a few times to really fuck people up. We didn't do that. We just had Bryan Lee out there the whole time. But the idea was never to have them fucking be a team and do all that other bullshit after turning babyface on Ted DiBiase. That's just somebody saying it. But here's what Meltzer can say after we didn't do that. They changed plans.
Yeah.
No, that was never the plan. But as we got into it, as always, we had Bryan Lee come to the studio and get in the ring and work with Undertaker to get his mannerisms down pat as close as we could. And until, for those who know, they knew. For those who didn't, they just weren't sure. And without Undertaker there to compare, I don't think as many people as Dave Meltzer would like to believe were not fooled, if I'm saying that right.
Well, here's the deal.
I think more people were fooled than not.
A couple years prior to this, people were saying, oh, that's not the real Ultimate Warrior. He's dead. This is the second one. So, right. It is what it is.
So it is what it is in reverse. But as we got into it and we did the whole build up to find the Undertaker, we brought Paul Bearer back. That was the first time that we wanted to say, hey, that's not the real Undertaker.
Right.
And then the search was on to find the real Undertaker. And this was probably this was my absolute greatest experience ever with a celebrity from outside of the wrestling world to come into our world. And that was working with Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah.
Find the Undertaker.
I was going to get there, but let's just talk about it. Go for it. Go ahead.
No, you go with where you're going, and we'll get to it when you're ready.
I want to talk about the decision for it to be Bryan Lee. There's lots of rumor and innuendo that he is somehow loosely related to the Undertaker. Just set that record straight.
No, I don't think so at all.
Okay. What was your experience like working with Bryan Lee? Obviously, Bryan Lee had been a big deal for Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain. He did a really good job for Paul Heyman and ECW, but here he's getting his big break. But we don't hear a lot about the Bulldozer or Primetime Bryan Lee. Do you have any good Bryan Lee stories you can share with us here?
I've got a really good one, but I won't share it. I can't share it. My brother would kill me.
Oh, just change some names. Change some names.
No, it's bad. But Bryan was, he was a big strapping bastard, and he used to like to take. No, I can't do it.
Oh man, maybe I'll talk you into it at a live show one day.
Maybe.
Let's talk about the character and how he got it down. In my head, like I've heard the story, allegedly, you guys sent some videotape to Kane and Rick Bogner when they were going to portray the fake Razor and the fake Diesel. Do you just ask Bryan Lee to study a bunch of tape you send him, and then he just starts to practice at his house?
No, and we didn't send. I mean, obviously, yes, we sent tapes to him, but we brought Rick Bogner and Glenn Jacobs in to the studio and had them go over it and over it and over it with Savio Vega and forget who the hell else we had come in there and just help them get that down. But with Bryan Lee, we did the same thing, and we brought Bryan up to the studio in Stamford with Undertaker, and had in the ring painstakingly going over the mannerisms of the Undertaker.
Is Vince involved in that part or not so much?
He was involved with a little bit of it, but mainly that was Undertaker and I that did most of that.
Do you guys set him up with a seamstress, or does he just try to alter some of Taker's old gear, or how does that work?
Most of that was Taker's old gear that was modified. They were about the same size. Bryan was probably about 3 inches shorter.
And he had to put some gimmicks in his boots.
He already had gimmicks in his boots.
Before we get on to talking about some business, let's talk about this from the Observer in that same issue. Jerry Jarrett has moved back from Stamford, Connecticut to Hendersonville, Tennessee. While he hasn't officially severed ties with the WWF, he is no longer part of the creative team. There are reports Jerry Jarrett is going to start a company that would lease jobbers to the major companies so the jobbers would work for him and would save the company some liabilities when it comes to the legal hornet's nest that will be wide open if the Chuck Austin decision isn't reversed. Do you remember Jerry's departure here and the way the word gets spread through the office? And had you heard about this jobber company concept?
Well, the enhancement deal was something that we had discussed with several people. We ended up doing it with Killer Kowalski. But Jerry left because he was lonely and homesick and didn't contribute a whole lot. You know.
Okay. Domino's Pizza buys a major corporate sponsorship for SummerSlam. It's going to be titled Domino's Delivers WWF SummerSlam. That's at least the advertising campaign, which will be included for all the advertising for the show. The company would heavily plug Domino's throughout television in both July and August, and they would constantly be talking about ordering pizza. They had SummerSlam on the box tops for all pizzas delivered in both July and August, and the advertised main event on the box top that was released even back in June was Undertaker versus Undertaker. Supposedly, allegedly, Domino's pays $250,000 for this sponsorship opportunity. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, probably so.
Bryan Lee's television debut as Ted DiBiase's Undertaker took place on the WWF Superstar syndicated show over the weekend in an interview segment where the original Undertaker, Mark Calloway, was dubbed over Lee's voice in studio to make television viewers believe it was the real McCoy. The makeup artists and those in television deserve a real praise for this one because aside from the small percentage of fans who know better, I doubt anyone else would even suspect this is a different person playing the part. Lee looked a lot more like The Undertaker than Jim Hellwig looked like the Ultimate Warrior when he came back, while the interview on a Heartbreak Hotel segment done live was a giveaway with Lee's voice. The problem was cleared up by the time the show aired. It isn't known when Calloway will return to confront Lee playing the role. The King of the Ring pay-per-view seems too rushed, and the angle has to be pretty well on television by early July since the pizza boxes advertising the match will already be public by then. I would assume it's at the upcoming television tapings. At the next set of tapings, they do an Evil Undertaker squash win with Bear coming out and trying to hug the Evil. And at this point, they're still trying to get over who is the original. Evil was about to hug Bear when DiBiase waved money at him and he stopped. King of the Ring 94, we'll get there at some point in the future. But what everybody was talking about mostly wasn't the pay-per-view, and the Undertaker wasn't on it. But they were talking about the idea that the new slogan that Monsoon and Savage were pushing was the New Generation WWF. And this is because Hulk Hogan had just signed with WCW. So let's briefly take a break here for a minute and talk about what impact that may have had on business at the time. I'm sure we'll come back to Hulk Hogan 94 and this signing and all of this, but was the New Generation WWF campaign already in the works, or when the rumors start to float that Hogan's about to sign, do you guys start to counter program right away?
No, that was something that was in the works going back even to WrestleMania, where Vince just wanted new. What do they do whenever they're promoting something like a cereal? It's new, more vitamins, more minerals. We'll have the new generation. So that was the thought process behind it.
They did a Superstars taping on June 21st in Pennsylvania. And on the taping, Paul Bearer did an interview saying he's been in contact lately with The Undertaker. On the Raw episode that aired on June 27th, Gorilla Monsoon accidentally refers to Bryan Lee as the new Undertaker. And apparently there were already mentions on television of the pizza boxes. Even though the fans aren't supposed to know at this point that there are two of them. How does this happen?
He was a new Undertaker. We had already started Paul Bearer coming out questioning that fact.
But I'm saying at this point,
Monsoon being Monsoon and being a babyface announcer wants to be the first one to tell you it's a new Undertaker.
I get you on that. I guess what I'm saying is they're delivering pizzas by this point with both Undertakers on there advertising SummerSlam, and you haven't even seen the real Undertaker return to confront the new Undertaker on TV. But if you ordered a fucking Works pizza or a Meatza, then you knew the main event.
Yeah.
No problem with that?
What it was. No. He figured that would be minuscule in comparison to the overall scope of things.
Well, he wanted the $250,000.
Damn right.
Okay. King's Court happens on the August 2nd edition of a Superstars taping. And here we have Ted DiBiase and Paul Bearer out, and DiBiase calls his Undertaker out, who then starts choking Paul Bearer. The lights go out, and then they flicker back on. Bearer's outside the ring, and Mark Calloway is inside the ring for the first time since January. And he squashes Quang. So I knew you'd correct that. I know you like that. Then Luger wrestles the evil Undertaker, who sits up after Luger's moves, but finally, when Luger caught him in the torture rack, Bam Bam Bigelow had to interfere for the DQ. The good Undertaker does a walkout, and the two Undertakers do a stare. One backs out and leaves. And then, of course, the Undertaker, we all know and love, squashes Bigelow with a choke slam in just a minute and 3 seconds. The next week in The Observer, or 2 weeks later, we see Dave Wright. The headline angle, Undertaker versus Undertaker, has gotten so cold that the reports we've gotten are that it will be pronounced dead after the first and only match. From what we can understand and what seemingly seems to be confirmed by hints dropped by Vince McMahon on the live Sunday call-in show on the USA Network, which was a major disaster, by the way, are that this angle, talked about 2 months ago as being the resurrection of big box office for the company, is officially being dropped. Matter of factly, that it would be the one and only meeting of the two Undertakers, and after that show, there would be only one. Whether it was the Leslie Nielsen skits, which I thought were entertaining, but I couldn't see it adding any sales, were falling flat, or simply the idea of copying the most over and unique character of the 90s only dilutes the impact of the original, it's pretty well acknowledged that this idea was born dead. From what we've been told, the decision was made to remove Bryan Lee from house show bookings for September, and he would return sometime very soon under a new name with a new look and as a new character. So let's talk about how that comes about, because As a kid, every kid I know was into this, Undertaker versus Undertaker. And Undertaker versus Yokozuna had been drawing awesome. Why did this not rub Vince the right way?
I don't think he was totally convinced with Bryan's work being that convincing in the ring doing Undertaker. So the thought of, and just for the record, he says that there was never any plans to do more than one. So it's not like, oh my God, he killed it. It was always the plan to do a one-off. This was Undertaker's return. It was a way to bring him back and have one match, one attraction, one time.
Well, but Goldberg was brought back for one match, one attraction, one time at Survivor Series, and that went well. So because it went well, they stretched it out. Why?
But it would be different if we were bringing Mark Calloway back as the Undertaker. It was, the whole idea was simply for Undertaker to re-enter and to have a dragon to slay him, and then be on to the next thing. It was simply an attraction, and that's all it ever was meant to be. It was never meant to be anything more beyond SummerSlam.
What type of deal would you guys have negotiated with Bryan Lee here? Would it have just been, we're going to bring you in for 3 months? Or
yeah, and if you work out well, then we might have something for you on down the road in a different gimmick, but we have to change your look and do something else with you down the road.
Meanwhile, over at WCW, the August 24th Clash of the Champions is Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, and it's the highest rated television special on TBS in all of 1994. It gets a 4.5 rating for the first hour, a 7.7 rating for the second hour, and it's the highest rated pro wrestling show on cable since the 1990 Mountain Madness Clash of the Champions, which drew 5.0. And probably the second most widely viewed pro wrestling match ever, behind Ric Flair and Lex Luger and Sting and Black Scorpion, also in 90. So WCW's business takes a real shot in the arm with this Hogan signing. Meanwhile, SummerSlam is on August 29th, and it's the first ever event at the United Center in Chicago, which Bruce just said was too fucking expensive for the WWF on our WrestleMania 13 episode, if you remember. But the WWF ran the first ever event there and drew a sellout crowd of 23,000 folks. Dave argues that there were reports that it was heavily papered and all over the radio the day of the show, saying that there were free tickets available at different shops. Meltzer does a poll, and everyone agrees the worst match on SummerSlam is Undertaker versus Undertaker. He writes, the WWF's lack of talent depth showed itself once again at SummerSlam, a well-produced show with a phenomenal title match, followed by possibly the worst main event in pay-per-view history. What'd you think of that?
Fuck Dave Meltzer. And first of all, going back to your comment about the United Center, we did run the United Center, and the WrestleMania we were talking about took place after this event.
Correct.
We had run it, and it was way too expensive. We didn't like it, and we liked Rosemont for the ambiance and everything else, and it was a cheaper building to run. But as far, there's a lot of things, and it's real easy to sit behind your computer or your typewriter and judge when you've never taken a bump, you've never been in the ring, and you've never put your own balls on the line to promote something or actually produce something other than, like I said, sit behind your computer screen and sit there and critique and bitch and moan about somebody like Meltzer and these fake news people do. So fuck him and his goddamn opinion, because what they don't know is what did take place behind the scenes, and what they don't know is what we did have planned and what we didn't get to have come across, because the match, like I said, it was designed to be a one-off. It was designed to be a gimmick match. It was designed to simply bring Undertaker back and have him slay a dragon. The match, because Bret Hart and Owen Hart had a cage match earlier in the show that went 20 minutes heavy. So all of a sudden you have a match at the very end of the night with Undertaker and a guy who is nervous as shit, who in his mind is auditioning for a job in Bryan Lee, who has their match now condensed into roughly about 10 or 12 minutes, whatever the hell it was. so much of it was the entrance. So much of it was the pantomime. So much of it was the build that we didn't have time to tell because of things going longer earlier in the show. So, again, it sounds like I'm making excuses, and I am, because that's what happened, and shit happens. So it wasn't great. It wasn't the match of the year. It didn't do 4 stars or 6 stars in the fucking Tokyo Dome. I don't give a fuck. It was an attraction. It was meant to be an attraction. It was meant to be a way to bring Undertaker back and have him slay a dragon on top at a pay-per-view. And didn't accomplish that, didn't deliver, but there were extenuating circumstances that made that happen.
How hot was Undertaker at Brett when he walks through the back and knows that he went 20 minutes long and just slaughtered?
Pretty fucking hot. He was hot.
What's that sound like? Don't do an impression. Just tell me. No,
he was fucking hot. I know. You know what? Nobody was there for the confrontation because no one wanted to be there. But Taker did go and speak to Brett. Just let him know, hey, he wasn't happy with it. I mean, well, I don't know. It wasn't heated. Taker's not that kind of a guy. But he did have a conversation with him that night. And no one was there. So no one was witness. Only people that know what happened in that is Undertaker and Brett.
Meltzer would write, what seemed like a cute idea materialized into watering down the drawing power of the company's top attraction. Another cute idea, like using Leslie Nielsen of the Naked Gun movies, and at this show, his sidekick George Kennedy, in search of the Undertaker, flopped just as bad, as the two were hampered by an incredibly vapid script. As if someone came up with the bones of an idea, but nobody had any of the meat, they did the idea anyway. When it was over, the show, even though it had a few great angles and one excellent match, came off due to the last impression as a lackluster major event. I'm of the opinion that if the Undertaker match had been put on in the third slot on the card, its impact at the end would have been minimal, and fans leaving with a cage match would have left on a much brighter note, and a thumbs-up ratio would have been far better. My only guess is that the Undertaker wouldn't bomb like it did, obviously, and they like to end shows with a babyface conquering all, and the cage match ended with the face getting destroyed at the end. But that mindset ended up leaving a show on a flat note rather than a high note. The natural comparison to the Clash a few days earlier, where the Clash had much more excitement and much more meaning. Ultimately, of course, the Undertaker won after 9 minutes and 10 seconds. Undertaker Mark Calloway won against Undertaker Bryan Lee.
Well, Meltzer can take his thumb and shove it up his ass.
In the match, they do a 7-minute ring entrance with Paul Bearer coming out alone, and then the coffin that Calloway was buried in at the Royal Rumble was wheeled out by some hooded men. And inside the casket,
Druids, pal, Druids.
Who played the Druids here? Just
fuck if I know. Just guys.
It was me, Austin. However, that's what I was hoping you'd go for. However, in the casket was a giant urn, and when Bear opened the urn, we got a nice thunder and lightning show. Finally, Calloway showed up. The special effects was good, but it was done the minute the bell rang. One guy in the ultra slow motion has limitations. 2 guys doing it kills the match. It didn't help that Lee seemed lost in the ring, and that the two didn't look enough alike, and the size difference was noticeable. It was as if everyone knew the ending once Calloway showed up. No heat at all. Even McMahon had to acknowledge it, trying to get over the crowd was stunned into silence, because there was no tension in the air. So it was just dull silence, not stunned silence. Lee used a chokeslam and a tombstone, but Calloway sat up both times. Calloway reversed the second tombstone, then delivered 2 more, crossed Lee's arms, and pinned him. He then rolled him into the casket, thereby killing the Gimmick. Word we get is Lee will return with a new look as a biker character with no acknowledgement of this prior role. Leslie Nielsen and George Kennedy ended the show with a skit as weak as the match. -1 star. So, your thoughts on the match, the build-up, and Leslie Nielsen and George Kennedy, which I know you really enjoyed.
The match was horrible. But the match, had its limitations, and they had to chop a whole lot of it out that they had. The match was one of those that had to be laid out and tell a long story, and much longer than what it lasted going out there. And Bryan probably was lost because what they had planned and what they had worked out prior to that, they were ad-libbing and they were just trying to get through it and not have a finish take place as they were off the air. So we had to get the damn thing done. We didn't have a network at that time. We couldn't go over. We had to get done by 10:55 at night. So, yeah, it sucked. It wasn't great. But I'll stand by it. Hey, it was my story. If you don't like it, great. You didn't like it. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It was a story to bring the Undertaker back and to have an Undertaker versus Undertaker, the feeling being that the greatest foe of the Undertaker would be himself, looking at himself in the mirror and having to face the old evil Undertaker. Execution probably could have been better, but then again, that's Monday morning quarterbacking and hindsight being 2020. We had fun with it. We did what we wanted to do, and like I said, it was always intended to be a one-off and a way to bring Undertaker back. The Leslie Nielsen involvement, I thought that those skits leading up to it were some of the best stuff we'd ever done. They were clever. They were well done. They were well written, well produced by David Sahadi, and people to this day still talk about it. And Leslie Nielsen was an absolute pro in every sense of the word, from him being early on set and working with us to him going to the all-nude bar in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where all they wore were knee pads, and just being an all-around great guy. And to tell you what a great guy he was, George Kennedy, who's one of his best friends, we had no deal with George Kennedy. But Leslie Nielsen asked us to use George Kennedy that day because George was in a bad way at that point in his life. And he said, just use him, make him feel loved. He goes, I'd like to have him be a part of this. And Leslie Nielsen offered to pay George out of his pay. And Vince, of course, wouldn't do that. Vince paid George, and all was well. But I just was always impressed by that. And Leslie Nielsen's my favorite celebrity I ever worked with.
Wow. That's quite a statement right there.
Yep. He was great. But it was what it was. And it could have been better, but a lot of things could have been better. And shit happens sometimes. I'm not going to take away from Brett and Owen's match, because that match was great too. It was excellent. It was just too long for we went over what it was allotted.
So let's talk about the fall of 1994 and where we go from here. Meltzer writes a piece in September being very critical of the talent and the way that they had been booked, writing something like, no matter how strong the storyline may be, does anyone really buy Jim Neidhart as the lead heel in the promotion? Saying that there's not anything wrong that The Undertaker, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, Diesel, or Razor had done, but that there didn't seem to be enough star depth in the show. When was Jim Neidhart the lead heel? I think he was joking that there was a situation where you guys couldn't bring back anything from the past and freshen it up.
Okay.
Anyway, let's talk about Survivor Series. You guys start building for it. It's going to take place in San Antonio. The plan was for it to be Bret Hart defending his title against Bob Backlund in a little bit of a new generation versus old generation showdown for the title. Undertaker and Yokozuna in a casket match. The first time Hart and Backlund work out, though, it's a house show in Utica, New York, and it's September 26th. And Meltzer reports that it flopped, and apparently so bad that the company lost all the confidence in their promotional ability to try to sell the show. The next day, they do a series of television tapings in Poughkeepsie, and during a Yokozuna squash, they play The Undertaker's music. Yoko freaks out and runs away, trips and falls. So this feels identical as it did a year prior, where they built up this Undertaker casket match for the Royal Rumble. So we start the year with this Undertaker Royal Rumble casket match against Yokozuna, and we're going to finish it at Survivor Series. Same opponent, same match. They're still doing lots of stuff with the USWA. Undertaker versus Sid Vicious draws really, really well on October 17th. It's their second biggest show of the year. They also come back and do it again with Sid Vicious Undertaker on November 4th. This time it draws a little less, but it's still the third largest crowd of the year. I guess you got
USWA, right?
Yeah, for USWA. I guess
what was that crowd?
3,100 and 2,500.
Okay, yeah.
So gates of 16,000 and 14,000. But that's big money for them at the time. And as anybody listening knows, they were paying the guys $50 if they were in the main event. So, they do a series of television tapings in Bethlehem in November where Luger and The Undertaker seem to be pushed as the top baby faces. They're the only guys who get the big entrances and pyro and so forth. And then Undertaker and IRS start to feud, Death and Taxes, where the Undertaker has IRS come to the ring with two guys dressed in Grim Reaper outfits. Somehow the feud is over that even when you die, you can't escape paying your taxes. Please tell me this is real.
That's real.
This is amazing that I freestyled that. And then boom, there it is.
Well, yeah. I got, again, I'll post a picture when this posts of the vignettes that we shot with IRS in the cemetery, and we shot them during the day. Now, normally when we shoot Undertaker vignettes, we would shoot those all at night in a smoky cemetery, and usually I would try and pick a day where it was extremely either flesh freezing winds, which we shot vignettes in flesh freezing winds, or pouring rain, one of the two. We would always have to have inclement weather if we were shooting Undertaker vignettes in a cemetery. But with IRS, we shot them in the middle of the day, and we had a hole dug, and we had the casket propped up on the dirt on the side of it. As we're shooting vignettes, a car pulls up. They stop. They get out of the car, and I'm thinking somebody needs to go over and intercept these people so they don't walk into my shot. And the funeral director, who was out there watching the shoot, he runs over and he comes over to me just, nervous as can be. I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "It's their plot."
Oh, my God.
This woman had purchased side-by-side plots for her and her husband, and she was bringing him over to surprise him and show him their final resting place. And when they pull up, there's a freshly dug hole and a casket and all these camera equipment. And the guy gets out and he goes, "Wow." And he says, I guess she knew something I didn't know. But as we're shooting, yeah, people that had purchased the plot came up to see it. But those were fun. That was some good shit. The only two things you can count on are death and taxes.
I love it. After Survivor Series, it's announced that they're still going to be running A and B house show loops here. And the A-team shows are going to be Bob Backlund versus Bret Hart, Undertaker versus IRS, and Shawn Michaels and Diesel versus the Head Shrinkers. I can only imagine what was on the B shows. Survivor Series, here we go. Third place for the best match, Undertaker versus Yokozuna, happened on November 23rd, San Antonio. It drew an evenly mixed set of responses. Yes, sir.
And by the way, no, it wasn't a desperation. Oh, my God, there was a bad match at a house show. The plan was always to do the return. Yoko got rid of Taker. We planned on having Taker come back, Taker versus Taker, then go to Yoko. It was not a knee-jerk reaction.
All right.
Well, your bitch boy said it was a knee-jerk reaction to a Bret Backlund match.
I don't think he said that exactly. So Meltzer says that the overall reaction to the show was just kind of average. What did you think about Survivor Series 1994?
I thought it was a good show. I thought that it delivered, and again, we were still in a rebuilding process with Bret and Luger and everybody, so it served its purpose. We got to the next point.
Of course, the decision here is made to do a Diesel turn and then have Backlund become champion, even though he's just going to be transitional champion. You guys just wanted to get the belt off of Brett so you could get it to Diesel without hurting Brett in the process, right?
Correct. Well, plus Vince had fallen in love with Kevin Nash at that point.
God, what a baby face. Look at that big bastard.
So yeah, rather than have him drop it to have Brett drop it to him, babyface, you want to get that heel transition.
So the Undertaker gets the win against Yokozuna in the casket match after about 15 minutes. This time he has Chuck Norris guard the aisle to keep the heels away from interfering. Remember Royal Rumble 94? And according to Meltzer, he thought it was the second biggest pop or the biggest pop in the show so far. They do the cool thunder and lightning entrance for the Undertaker here, which is a cool special effect. At one point, the Undertaker decks Jim Cornette. He kicks out of the casket, just refusing to let it close. Eventually, Bundy and Bigelow come down and distract Chuck Norris so IRS can run in from the other side and put the Undertaker in a sleeper. They roll him into the casket, and eventually Yokozuna recovers from a flying clothesline and goes to close the casket, but Undertaker instead grabs him by the throat. Double J runs down and takes what Meltzer calls a weak-looking kick from Chuck Norris and sells it huge.
Motherfucker, that's Chuck Norris giving a sidekick. Any other mortal human being would not survive.
Jarrett ran away. Undertaker hits another flying clothesline, the DDT, the tombstone, and then breaks Fuji's flag and puts it over Yokozuna in the casket. 2.5 stars, according to Dave Meltzer. What did you think of this match, and how did you think it compared to the Royal Rumble casket match?
I thought both were good. I thought this one was good. I thought the whole show was good overall. Accomplished what we wanted to accomplish.
Eventually, Meltzer would write, 1994 would be a year where The Undertaker would die, be resurrected, but when he came back, his drawing power would be nearly dead.
Yeah, he'd never be, you know what, he'd probably never be able to draw another motherfucking penny after that because Nostra fucking Meltzer fucking says he can't draw now. So, you know, folks, go ahead and put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Here's something fun.
You haven't got me this fucking hot in a long time. You haven't quoted all your misquotes in a long time, so fuck him.
Let me make you happy for a minute.
Make me happy.
It was reported at the end of 1994 in the Observer that Ico Pro was sold and is no longer a part of the Titan structure. I don't know when we'll talk about Ico Pro again. Give me some good Ico Pro stories.
Dr. Squat. Fred Hatfield.
God, you know, I got there after Ico Pro. I got back from my hiatus after Ico Pro and all that shit had started. The one good thing of Ico Pro was the Ico Pro protein bars. They were kind of like a bit of honey. They weren't bad, but the rest of that stuff was worse than god awful. Have you ever? I don't like licorice. I don't like black licorice.
I hate licorice. And if you like licorice, unsubscribe from this fucking show right now. I don't even want you as a listener.
Yeah, and the Ico Pro drops that you put under your tongue, the best way I could describe them it would be that they tasted like bad black licorice. But I can't think of anything that tastes worse than black licorice other than the Ico Pro drops.
Wait. I just want you to say the candy one more time. What can't you stand? What type of candy?
Black licorice. What the fuck are you laughing at? How do you say it, hillbilly boy?
I just love the way you say it. It's my new favorite word for you to pronounce. What is it again?
You tell me, what word do you want me to pronounce?
The word after black.
How do you say it?
I don't say it. I call them shits Twizzlers.
Okay, but what is a Twizzler?
Red.
Red what?
I don't know. I'm a hillbilly boy.
It's licorice. How the fuck do you pronounce it?
Do you ever have some Twizzlers when you go to the theater?
It's the theater.
I love when you say that too. It makes me very happy. Okay, let's get out of here. Let's talk about the Wrestling Observer one more time.
Oh, God damn. Are we about done?
Yeah, we are. We're wrapping up. 1994 end of the year awards. Best Babyface. Number 5 for The Undertaker. Most improved, most charismatic, and most overrated were all honorable mentions. Most disgusting promotional tactic was number 4 for The Undertaker Death and Resurrection. The worst match, number 2, was Undertaker versus Undertaker. An honorable mention was Undertaker versus Yokozuna at the Royal Rumble. The worst feud of the year, hands down, Undertaker versus Yokozuna. Best gimmick, number 1, The Undertaker. Again, the worst gimmick.
Hang on. Let's look at that. Okay, in all your reports, we already talked about how Undertaker versus Yokozuna was one of the best drawing things we had. But yet this dipshit talks about it being worst feud.
Yeah.
So obviously he has no finger on the pulse of what the real fan wants. That's all I got to say about that. John Paul Shellnut would say, that's all I got to say about that.
I feel like we should put out a quick word here. We mentioned him earlier. Bryan Lee, when they said he'd be repackaged as a biker, he was. That was 1994. He comes back in 1997 as Chains, as a member of the DOA, the Cycles of Apocalypse. Another quick little factoid about the Undertaker's title win. When he first won it, his very first title win against Hulk Hogan, I believe this made the Undertaker the youngest WWF World Champion in history until Yokozuna broke his record. That's at least the way I remember it. Is that the way you remember it?
I think so. What was he, 24?
I don't know.
Yeah, he would have been 24, 25.
I know you've got a fun story to tell about traveling with the Undertaker, and I want to get to that, but I do want to go ahead and just mention briefly that the reason we're doing this, of course, is the Undertaker is obviously a Hall of Famer and just had his last match, what many think is his last match at Wrestlemania. And the Big Show said the Undertaker, at least in his opinion, is the greatest professional wrestler of all time. And a lot of people may discount this because it's not some famous historian, and maybe Big Show has a unique perspective because he's a big man. But so many big men have come and gone in the sport, but with the exception of Andre, none have had the longevity of the Undertaker. And I found that to be pretty interesting from his perspective. And I also want to share this with you. In an interview that Vince McMahon did with Muscle and Fitness in the February 2015 issue, he was asked, do you have a favorite superstar? And you would think he might dance around a bit before answering and giving some sort of canned response, but instead he says that would be Undertaker because of his loyalty, his longevity, and his extraordinary commitment to his character. We have lots of fun creating fun. Superstars try to crack each other up from time to time, and we've all tried to get the Undertaker to break character, and we can't do it. He is such a professional and an extraordinary human being behind the character. He's committed to his craft and has worked through injuries. I don't know that you can get a nicer quote from Vince McMahon about your work as a professional. Do you have anything?
And I agree with every word he said. Because there is Undertaker, people ask me, who's your favorite? My favorite is Undertaker. And that's professionally and personally. Dear friend of mine, and just an extraordinary athlete, extraordinary performer, and deserves every single thing that he's ever gotten in this business.
I know you've told the story before, but I want you to share it again quickly. When you were first traveling with Mark on the road, when you were managing him as Brother Love, I believe you told this on the 1990 Survivor Series show, but let's do it again here. Share the story when you guys leave the building, you're lost, maybe you're in Chattanooga, I forget. You pull over for directions, and maybe a not so great neighborhood. Take it from there.
Well, we had left the building very quickly, and Undertaker was wearing the makeup that made his eyes look really dark, and I was wearing my Brother Love makeup, and we just darted out. We put wet washcloths on our face and quickly washed our faces and jumped in the car as quickly as we could, going from Chattanooga, driving to Atlanta, Georgia. And we wanted to get there before the bar closed. So we're hauling ass, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a somewhat unsavory neighborhood. Lost. Can't find the highway. So we pull over kind of into a gas station, and there are a group of guys. standing outside, and we pull up, and Undertaker has the seat set way back because it's like a Ford Taurus. And he's 6'7", so he has to have the seat leaned way back just so he can fit in the damn thing, and he's driving. And I roll the window down. There's my bright red, peach face going, "Hey, buddy, can you get us to the highway? We're trying to get to the highway to Atlanta," whatever the hell it was. And this guy comes walking up to us, sauntering up, very slowly, grabbing his private parts, and saying, "Well, hey, looky here." And he actually did say, "Looky here. Maybe y'all can help me out some, and y'all can maybe," and he starts like he's going to hold us up or just wants money or something. When out of nowhere, Undertaker, Mark Calloway, does a sit-up. And by the way, he's still wearing his trench coat. He's got a black T-shirt on, but he's still wearing his trench coat. And he does a sit-up in the car and snaps his head and looks at the guy. And now he's got the pale face. He's got the dark purple eyes and all this shit. And this guy takes one look at him. His eyes got big as saucers and started backpedaling, so much so he trips on himself and says, "All right, well, look here. This is what y'all need to do. Y'all need to go right down here, 2 blocks, take a right. You're going to take the very first left, and that's going to put you right on the highway. Y'all need to get the hell out of here." And he couldn't get away from us fast enough. But that was one of my favorite stories of just being with Taker the first time. And he saw him. And oh, I'm sorry, and I left out the best part. He goes, "Man, he looked like that. That dude looked like he just killed somebody." And he did.
Real quick, WrestleMania 10. I've always been fascinated by the idea that one of the biggest characters in the company isn't here. I know he had asked for some time off. Was there ever any consideration for trying to call him at the last minute and getting him involved in WrestleMania 10?
We would have liked to have had him involved, but no, there wasn't.
Real briefly, tell everybody how Paul Bearer came into the WWF. I know we covered it on the 1990 Survivor Series, but I know a lot of people will want it here as well.
I had been managing Undertaker. I was given the opportunity I also worked behind the scenes. And Vince came to me and said, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can either work in front of the camera and be Undertaker's manager full time," because the package of the Undertaker and the house shows, it wasn't the same without a manager. And if I did that, I would have to give up my job behind the scenes producing television. I chose producing television. And we were looking for someone to manage Undertaker and take my place. And Percy Pringle had inquired about working. So they brought Percy up just for a general interview in general to say, "Hey, what would you like to do?" And they said, "What have you done in the past?" Percy said, "Well, I'm a licensed mortician," and everybody popped because, oh my God, we're looking for somebody for the Undertaker. And Paul Bearer was born. And Road Warrior Hawk is the one that gave him his name. What about Paul Bearer?
And the decision was made to drop Kane from his name. How did that come about?
Just because Vince liked the Undertaker. He didn't like the name Kane at that time. He just liked simply the Undertaker.
And the whole storyline of how Kane came about will be on the poll coming up in September of this year. Will be upon, believe it or not, the 20th anniversary of the debut of the Kane character. Real quick, I know we talked about it, but let's touch on it one more time. Who was doing like sketches of the character, and who would have helped come up with the initial drawings for what we became to know the Undertaker's outfit?
It was the art department, Debbie Bonanzio and her crew. I don't know the one person who actually did it. They had a whole department down there to do it, entire third floor.
And Jim Johnston did the music, correct?
Correct.
Anything else you can think of we need to mention on the Undertaker before we kind of put a bow on 93, 94, the early years of the Deadman?
God, there's so many things, and I'm sure we will cover it, like you said, over the next 12 years. We've got enough Undertaker stories to last us a while, so I think it's enough for this run.
Well, we appreciate you checking it out. We're looking forward to being back here with you next week at noon. We want to ask you again, go to podsurvey.com/wrestle. It means a lot to us. We also want to thank you for supporting our sponsors, including our great friends over at rgt4law.com. On the other side, we've got the story of when Bruce met Dave Meltzer and this week's poll. Stay tuned.
Did you know there are billions of dollars set aside for asbestos victims and their families? If you or a loved one has been affected by mesothelioma or an asbestos-related cancer, you can call 855-748-4529 for a free consultation. That's 855-748-4529. Or visit rgtforlaw.com for more information. Robert Taylor, R.G. Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, Bruce, so here's what everybody wants to hear about. You posed for a picture with Dave Meltzer?
I hugged Dave Meltzer twice, one night.
So I guess we should let everybody know here's kind of what happened. They didn't want to advertise that Bruce Prichard was going to be there because there was rumor and innuendo that Meltzer wouldn't be there if Bruce was going to be there. And so many people had gotten accustomed to hanging out with Dave Meltzer, and his, fan base was going to be there. People really want to meet Dave. He doesn't do stuff like this a lot. So they didn't want to have someone buy tickets to Wrestlemania and then show up and then there's no Dave Meltzer. So they put my name.
Why? It would have been better.
They put my name as appearing there, but not Bruce Prichard, which I found hilarious. But either way, they don't necessarily say that he's going to be coming on stage. Dave is seated on stage. They even say they're going to announce once he sees Bruce is there. I believe they told Dave they're going to introduce Conrad first, and then when they introduce Conrad, then you can exit, and then Bruce will come in and sit down. Well, Bruce and I just walk up there in the opposite order. Bruce first, me second. And now Dave is in a spot where he has to make a decision. Do I stay or do I go now? And he decided to hang out. What happened from there?
And I decided to hug him.
Yeah, and so at that point, it became interesting because when Bruce stood up and demanded a hug, if Dave Meltzer says no, he's the heel. But he didn't say no. He took the picture, and it blew up the internet Thursday night. So if you missed Wrestlemania, you missed a lot. You should check out Wrestlemania next year. I'm sure they'll have another one at Wrestlemania. And Bruce, it was a pretty fun experience because I wasn't exactly sure how we would be received in there. I had never done a Wrestlemania before, but when they got to the Q&A and they asked, Bruce, how do you spend your days? I knew, hey, we're on to something.
That was absolutely crazy, man. And Wrestlemania, and let me be clear, I don't hate Dave Meltzer, and I told him that earlier in the night. I sought him out. I shook his hand. I'm not sure he wanted to exactly shake my hand. And I posed for a picture with him upstairs. I don't know that he had any idea I was coming up there, but I don't hate him, but fuck him. It was nice. It was nice to see a lot of other people there, like Mark Henry, The New Day, Eric Bischoff, MVP, Jim Ross, who for some reason wanted to have anal sex with me or something when he was up there at some point. So that was kind of strange. I think that was your doing.
I didn't do anything with your butt, bro.
Well, you were egging him on, but it was interesting, man. It was great to do Wrestlemania and WrestleCon. Got to reconnect with a lot of folks there. And check this out. If you haven't seen it, go check out my Twitter and see the 3 hottest models in the world, Tori Wilson, Candice Michelle, and Lisa Marie modeling the I Used to Be Over caps. That was nice of them to put that on the tweet.
You got to hang out at WrestleCon where you met those folks. And you saw a lot of your old friends there, too. Who all did you run into and catch up with? And what were people who approached you at WrestleCon saying about the pod?
100% everybody that came up to me at WrestleCon to come by and get a picture and autograph, all were talking about the podcast. And that absolutely blew me away. Very humbling. It was great. Ran into Tommy Wildfire Rich, Hall of Famer, Teddy Long, Pete Gass from the Mean Street Posse was over there at WrestleCon. Kevin Sullivan, who's on, of course, the MLW Radio Network. Got to reconnect with Bobby Heenan, Ron Simmons, Bully Ray. The Rock's father, Rocky Johnson, was sitting right next to me all day at WrestleCon. That was a trip and a half. But just so many more. And we also got to do Jim Ross's show. I did Jim Ross's show on Saturday and Sunday with Jeff Jarrett and Karen Jarrett, Mick Foley, Tony Schiavone. What a miserable prick he is.
Yeah, Tony had a good time. We're going to talk about that on Tony's show this week, but we really appreciate JR coming out and still doing his shows and inviting us over to kind of hang out and check things out. He's obviously been through a rough patch. If you haven't lately, you should throw him a follow and check out his show. Man, he's powering through all of this, and it can't be easy. And he's part of our wrestling family. So whether you're a JR fan or not, you ought to go check him out and show a little support right now. Send him a tweet. He'd love to hear from you.
I love me some JR. And you missed this, and I told you this was probably the highlight of my week. Well, it wasn't the highlight of my weekend, but Jim Cornette. And it was absolutely one of the funniest things you've got to hear is Jim Cornette imitating me doing Jim Cornette. And goddamn, you gotta know, it's a fucking triple with triple cheese, extra cheese, motherfuckers, on a double. And he had me on the floor imitating me, imitating him pretty much all weekend. And that was an absolute blast hanging out with Corny for a few days.
Hey, we should mention right fast, too, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, who are brand new Hall of Famers, could not put over the podcast enough. So they absolutely love listening to the show. Ricky told me that he's almost wrecked his car a few times laughing at you doing that very same Jim Cornette impression. I also got to attend some WWE stuff over the weekend. It surprises me how many of the guys listen. More than one approached me in a hushed whisper, kind of looked over both shoulders and said, "Are you not banned yet?" Which I thought was awesome to whisper, "Are you not banned yet?" But shout out to a friend of ours. If you, I probably shouldn't say his name, but if you watched the red carpet this last weekend, you saw a little wink and a nod and some rumor and innuendo in there. So appreciate the support there. Our boy Dolph Ziggler showed up to the Superstore wearing a Rib'em t-shirt. We appreciate his support as always. And shout out to the Pope, who has recently discovered the podcast, and he is all in. But I guess the main event of the weekend, man, I mean, it has to be the live show. So what'd you like? What didn't you like? Give it to us.
First of all, I got to give a shout out to those crazy motherfuckers who stopped in the middle of the street when I was crossing the street at 8:15 or whatever in the night to get to the club to get out and take selfies with me. That was just amazing, the response that I got. And we had a few WWE superstars, and again, we're not going to get them in trouble, who stopped by the show earlier in the evening to come by and say hello and wish us well and give us their support. I thought that was great. You guys know who you are, and I love you, and I appreciate you, and I thank you guys for coming by and saying hello because it was great to see you. Yeah, but that wasn't all.
Very cool.
We had surprises, dude. I'm in the back, and they come back and they go, "There's somebody up front named Billy." And remember when we were doing a show last week or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Mean Street Posse?
Yeah.
I was talking about that little bastard, Billy Pirro.
Yep.
He brought his son to the show and came back. I introduced you to him. And Billy Pirro and his son came back, original member of the Mean Street Posse. And it was just great seeing all those folks and that little bastard, Hornswiggle.
By the way, let me just say that's the first time years ago hanging out in the back with Rick at some random Raw or pay-per-view or something, whatever. And we talked for a long time, but I'm sure he doesn't remember that. But he could not have been nicer to me and my daughter when he ran into us at WrestleCon. Shout out to Hornswoggle for being such a fan of the show and such a cool motherfucker. I had a great time.
He's a great guy.
God, he's awesome to hang with, and I can't wait to get fucked up with him one day. It'll be a good time.
Well, speaking of people that are awesome to hang with, a real special shout out goes to Dave Silva, who does all of our graphics, works tirelessly on this show because he loves it. And he came to Orlando just to hang out with us and help us with the show.
Yeah, he didn't go to Wrestle. He didn't go to Wrestlemania. He went everywhere we went. He hung out, he filmed, he took pictures. You may remember, once upon a time, he was a big supporter of the Taz show, was very involved on the Taz show. He did some stuff on our Ric Flair show. He's a big podcast wrestling fan, just like everybody listening to this and me. But he has really doubled down on his devotion to us. And man, we really appreciate you. If you've laughed at the silly graphics that you see on our Twitter accounts, let me assure you, it's probably from Dave Silva. The funny videos are from him or Chris McDonald. But Dave went to quite a commitment to come support us in our very first live show and filmed it just for us. No, we're not selling it. Don't ask for it, because we're going to learn from it and we're going to practice to get better for the future. But we should also go ahead and thank our good buddy Justin Roberts. His brand new book is available and shipping right now on Amazon. It's called Best Seat in the House, Your Backstage Pass Through My WWE Journey. You might want to plug your ears for this part, Bruce, but lately there's been a lot of talk about what's going on with Morrow and bullying in the WWE. Justin Roberts don't give a fuck, and he writes all about it in this book. So if you're looking for dirt that Bruce isn't going to give you, check out Best Seat in the House, Your Backstage Pass Through My WWE Journey. It's Justin Roberts' book. He may not be like, oh, I love him. Okay, I get you're a Howard Finkel guy. The book is fucking killer. Go check it out. It's a good value.
I got a sidebar that you're going to go, what the fuck are you talking about? Why are you bringing it up here? I'm bringing it up here because of how I take notes sometimes, and I just write shit randomly. But I got a call today from Barry Blaustein, who is, you might know, he's the producer. He's the guy that did Beyond the Mat.
Right.
I got real nervous when I got the call because I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, if he was going to be hot at me or happy with me. But it was the best phone call, just catching up. And Barry is a fan of the podcast and listened to Beyond the Mat and was actually calling to thank us for what we said, the nice things that we said about Beyond the Mat, and actually said how sorry he felt for me having to be cross-examined every week by Perry Mason.
Yeah.
And it was great. I just, give a shout out to Barry because I promised him I would. But then the main event of the main event, go ahead, let's get to it and thank the...
I mean, what a fun time this was. Everybody came to the show, and as soon as we walked out on stage, I was first, and then Bruce was second. Of course, Bruce is the headliner. It's worth mentioning that Bruce came out to our brand new theme song, which you heard at the very beginning of this show, provided to us by Matt Kuhn. Matt is just a hardcore WWE fan and wrestling fan, just like everyone listening to this, and went out of his way to say, hey guys, can I help with music? And he created something that we are really proud of. We hope you enjoyed it. It was at the beginning of this show. Thanks a lot, Matt. Anyway, when Bruce is out there, almost immediately, the fans wanted one thing. And what did they want us to do, Bruce?
Spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight.
And then, of course, at the end of the show, when we got ready to give it to him, I told Bruce, we can't really do it like this. If you're going to do it, you got to do it in style. So we broke out a custom BP hat that lit up kind of like the old Double J hat did. But then right as we were getting ready to take off and start singing, we were interrupted
by J-E
double
F J-A
double R
E double T. And we sang our duet. And here's the crazy part. Conrad, I don't even know if you know this, but for those of you who noticed that I had my phone on stage with me and kept checking it, I was checking it to see if Jeff Jarrett had arrived yet. And when I went to sing at the very end, I had no clue if he was there or not. So that's the honest to God truth.
So it wasn't just a surprise for
it was a surprise
for you. That's hilarious. Well, here's the deal. It was going to be a good time. At that point, man, everybody was good, liquored up. So everybody was going to have a good time regardless. We do want to give a quick shout out to the promoter who put together the event, Chris. He did a great job taking care of everything. If we had it to do over again, we would have probably tried to find a bigger venue. When we first announced the show going on sale, we underestimated what the interest would be. It's important for you to remember that we kind of lined this up in October. We debuted the show in August. We announced it in November. It sold out in January. The show is so much bigger now than it was even in January that we could have never predicted the interest. So I'm not just saying, hey, if we had a bigger venue, we could have sold more tickets. I'm saying, hey, if we had a better venue, people could have been more comfortable. Moving forward, our live shows, we're going to be a little more involved in the building selection process. We legitimately just went by what the venue said. It said, hey, we can hold this many. Okay, cool. We didn't know that meant elbow to asshole. So not everybody who went had the best experience. We are going to make it right. You're going to see an email in your inbox very soon from Bruce and I. We want to get your feedback, see what you thought about the show, what you liked, what you didn't like. And we want to try to make it right. So if for whatever reason you didn't have a great time, and by the way, that's almost exclusively what we hear, that it was a great time. But if you didn't, we don't want you to be unhappy. We want to find a way to make you happy because we appreciate your support. I mean, we really are just trying to build a sense of community with the show. This is by wrestling fans for wrestling fans because that's what Bruce and I are. So we want to send out, the most heartfelt thanks to everyone who was in attendance. Without you, there is no something to wrestle with. There would be a Bruce Prichard, but who the fuck would care? So roll tide on that. Now,
I have feelings.
Well, here's the deal. You don't have enough feelings to make sure that you're not going to England without me. Hey, if you want to see something to wrestle with live and in person and you're across the pond, good news. I am tag teaming with a UK brother over there, and together we are going to craft the most masterful cross-examination in the history of something to wrestle with, Bruce Prichard. And when are we doing that, Bruce?
Well, we're going to be doing the first one on Sunday, July 16th in Birmingham, England at Around the World Bar. And then the second one we're going to be doing on Monday, July 17th in Manchester, England at the Comedy Store. And then Tuesday, rounding it all out in London, England at Walkabout Sports Bar. And tickets are available at hookedonevents.co.uk or ringsideworld.co.uk or wegottickets.com. And you can get the tickets for all three of those events for the United Kingdom. And I'm looking so forward to seeing everybody, all our friends from across the pond, because that's one of our biggest markets and it's going to be a blast.
Tickets are moving fast right now. The promoters were already blown away by the response. And let me go ahead and address this. Some of you are saying, well, you're not going to Scotland? If these shows go well, we're going to Scotland. Let me just tell you, that's the way this works. If these sell out and these shows work, promoters will come to us and say, hey, mate, you got to come to Scotland. No, I don't do impressions, but you know what I'm fucking talking about. And you can get these tickets right now starting at only £25. So check it out. WeGotTickets.com. ringsideworld.co.uk, hookedonevents.co.uk. Check it out, £25. Bruce Prichard is coming to see you, something to wrestle with. And don't get me wrong, he's getting cross-examined by me. There'll just be another mouthpiece over there, brother. And that guy's going to say Roll Tide too, all right? We should also mention that tickets are moving very, very fast for St. Louis. So before we get to July, we should circle back. June, Money in the Bank, Father's Day, nearly sold out for VIP. If you've been putting this off and you keep waiting a few more weeks, you're going to miss out. Go to notarib.com and you'll be able to give Dad the ultimate wrestling experience that day. You can come in, do the VIP meet and greet with Bruce and I. And by the way, people who had VIP this past week, not only did they get early entry and pick of where they wanted to post up for the show, they also got an autographed picture of Bruce and I, their picture with us, and a koozie that has the Something to Wrestle With logo on it. So go ahead and come see us. You never know what surprises are in store and what goodies we're going to have for you in St. Louis. That's this June. Money in the Bank, Father's Day. You'll be able to come see us at the South Broadway Club, a couple miles down the road. Go check out Money in the Bank. It'll be a pretty badass day. But maybe if you live in the Northeast, we've got good news. We promoted it on Twitter, and just based on Twitter, it's more than 50% sold out. So if you can hear my voice and you live in the Northeast and you'd like to see us, hurry right now to Ticketmaster because we're coming on Saturday afternoon, August 19th. It's at the Gramercy Theater in Manhattan. This is Summer Slam weekend. You don't want to miss it. You heard me. Tickets are more than 50% gone, and we've never even mentioned it on the show. It's Ticketmaster.com. Just search for Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Prichard, and you'll see the tickets right there. Tickets start at just $35. And I'm looking forward to this, Bruce. I never imagined, a couple of jackoffs, Brother Love and the Mortgage Guy, would be doing a stage show in Manhattan, but we're doing it, and people are digging it. More than 50% gone already, and we never even plugged it on the show.
I made that Twitter thing.
Yeah, it was off a tweet, he says.
It was off of a tweet. And here's the thing, man. I sent that to you as a rib, and you didn't even comment on how I spelled it.
Well, the deal is when I talked to you on the phone, you said off tweet. Yeah, it's more than 50% sold off tweet.
Well, not New York's going to be crazy. The UK is going to be crazy. St. Louis is going to be crazy. And that ain't all, because we got more to announce in the coming weeks about where the hell we're going to be live all across this damn country.
So here's the deal. We'd love to hear from you. We want to support you. We want to give you a good time. We want to give you exactly what you want, and we mean it. We put our money where our mouth is. We're actually going to let you pick what we do next week right here on Something to Wrestle With. So go vote right now. It's at Prichard Show, and shape the show. What do you want to hear next week? So here's what I suggest, Bruce. Let's go back and forth. I make a suggestion. You make a suggestion. You go first. What would you like poll option number 1 to be?
Okay, my number 1 request from everybody is they still want to hear about Katie Vick, Conrad.
Oh, my gosh. Is this real?
It's real.
Okay, Katie Vick, poll option number 1. What might we talk about if this godforsaken topic wins?
Well, we'll talk about what was really actually originally planned for the whole Katie Vick storyline and who was supposed to come in and what the original idea behind the whole damn thing was and how it kind of blew up in our face, not to mention the infamous Triple H video in the funeral parlor.
All right. So there you go. Katie Vick is back for the 983rd time. Poll option number 2. Well, you said I could pick, so I'm going to pick something that's been requested a lot. And before I mention it, no, we're not talking about the end. Poll topic number 2, Bruce knows what I'm picking now. Owen Hart came into the company as the Blue Blazer, had multiple incarnations. We've talked about him a little bit on several shows, but I'd like to have a full episode on all things Owen Hart, and that is poll topic number 2. Bruce, what's number 3?
Okay, how about keeping with the theme of this week's show, In Your House 14, Revenge of the Taker.
Now, I like that one. I like that one because that is right after WrestleMania 13. That's 1997, one of my very favorite shows or favorite years in wrestling. And it's a rematch from one of my favorite matches ever, Stone Cold and Bret Hart. Also on the card, the Sultan and Flash Funk, Legion of Doom against Owen Hart and the British Bulldog, Savio Vega with Crush against Rocky Maivia, Road Dogg Jesse James against Rockabilly with Honky Tonk Man, The Undertaker taking on Mankind, who has Paul Bearer with him, and then, of course, in the dark matches, Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Goldust, Furnace and LaFawn, and the Godwins. So that is your poll topic number 3. April of 1997 was the pay-per-view, and you know what? Let's keep with it. Let's deal with another Undertaker-themed show. Unforgiven is from April of 1998. This was in Greensboro, North Carolina, and there was lots of rumor and innuendo that somebody may have showed up to this show. What almost happened? What did happen? On the show, we've got Farouk, Ken Shamrock, and Steve Blackman taking on the Nation of Domination, Triple H taking on Owen Hart, the new Midnight Express, Bodacious Bart and Bombastic Bob taking on the real Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, Luna Vachon taking on Sable, the New Age Outlaws taking on the LOD 2000 with Sonny, Kane and The Undertaker in an Inferno match. That's right, an Inferno match. How crazy is that? And then in the main event, one of the more underrated matches of the year, Dude Love taking on Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was a huge show. Unforgiven, 1998. So those are your 4 poll topics. Let's recap. We're going to fucking retire this one forever when it loses. Poll option number 1 by Bruce, Katie Vick. He really wants to tell the story. Don't let him have it. Poll option.
Maybe it'll be a bonus show at some point.
I hope not.
It's interesting, damn it.
Poll option number 2. This one was mine. Owen Hart. Really looking forward to that. Hope that one wins. Poll option number 3. In Your House 14, Revenge of Taker from April of 1997. And then last but certainly not least, In Your House Unforgiven, April of 1998. So we're at the 20-year anniversary of one, the 19-year anniversary of another. Of course, never a bad time for Owen Hart and never a good time for Katie Vick. Go throw your vote down right now at Prichard Show. If you haven't already, throw us a follow at Prichard Show and follow us on Twitter. He is at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey It's Conrad, and we will be back next week right here on Something to Wrestle With.
Say my name.
Bruce Prichard.
The world of MLW Radio never stops.